two tonight, and the Dogs are in front.
This is 365 Sports, powered by SicEm365.com.
Jetty has a seam, and Jetty to the 20, Jetty to the 10, Jetty to the end zone! Touchdown, Boise State!
365 Sports is presented by IdealMRI.com. High-quality MRIs for $497 or less. IdealMRI.com. Your health is important, so is your budget.
Driving into the end zone, Jennings with the hookup to Jordan Hudson for the much-needed touchdown. An SMU answer, and they've got the lead back.
365 Sports is also brought to you by Texas Farm Bureau Insurance, protecting Texans since 1952.
Levitt looking middle, throws, end zone, and what a catch! Tyson, touchdown! And I think he got that foot down.
365 Sports is turbocharged by Unite Private Networks. Find out more at uniteprivatenetworks.com.
Second down, they'll go a little more conservative. They'll tell that to Bryson Washington. Touchdown! 51 yards.
Now here's David Smoak, Paul Catalina, and Craig Smoak.
All right, here we go on a gorgeous Tuesday. I'm not sure where you are. A lot of you spread out throughout the country, but it's gorgeous here in Central Texas. And I'm David Smoak, Paul Catalina, Craig Smoak here. Also, Emery Winter, Garrett Rosser today inside of the studio. And some of you already in the chat room. For example, Xavier Wolf always says this: college football is pain. I think all three of us, with our favorite teams, we agree with you. I don't think there's any question. Thank you that. C. Jenkins, 313, along with Zona, Tucson 93, and others. We appreciate you, Roy Melton, Barry Crawford, who won yesterday, right, Paul? The college football pick'em, S. Michael DeHart, and so much more. Scotty B was 1 and 2. Chris Klieman, after the loss to Arizona State, which Arizona State was decisive in that game, there were concerns about him. I know we all kind of mentioned this. He did shoot down rumors about anything about him retiring. I never thought that was the case. Said that he and his wife, Rhonda, are grateful for those in the athletic department, football family, for being there and doing everything they can to help the past couple of weeks, working on focusing on the positive. John Kurtz, who covers Kansas State, will join us today in the 5 o'clock hour to give us an update about what is the deal with K-State football.
Yeah, there's Chris Klieman. It was concerning to hear him in the post game the other night because it sounded really weird, and I know we're going to talk about it here in a second. But yeah, Kansas State, like I did a bit on Triple Option today, like reading message board geniuses, and they've got fans jumping off board at 7-3. It's a weird thing to be 7-3 and just have. Their down year is just slightly below where we thought they were. They're still good. It's just not this year. I don't know that like everything is invested, but one thing 1-9 has taught me is you have to enjoy the good times and don't make too big a deal over the not as good times, because believe me, and Kansas State fans should know this intimately, because
they invented the tough
bad
time.
Yeah. I think until a couple years ago, they still were the losingest program in college football history, despite a quarter century of being regularly good.
Yeah.
So because they had been so bad for so long. So you just got to enjoy the good times, and you have to deal with the medium times. And this is not medium. It's kind of medium, but
I think with the expectations this year,
it's like a large extra large.
Yeah.
It's not a full extra large.
Yeah.
Like it's like the tweener size.
Like I'm 5'10", and I always, when people ask me, I'm 5'10 and a half, I don't know why I've always done that, because I wish I could be 6 feet tall like Craig is. Craig, your thoughts about Chris Klieman? It was kind of a dark mood for him after that tough loss against Arizona State, and maybe it was just because of the way his team was beaten up.
Yeah, I think we've kind of danced around what he actually said. Like, we mentioned it 100 times in the last 2 days, but we haven't actually talked about what he said. So he was in his press conference, and towards the end of his press conference, he starts to get emotional and talking about how tough the last few weeks have been, and just that it's been a lot. And he's like lip quivering and just very obviously emotional. Like, I mean, that's the best word to use. And it was just sort of ominous and confusing. And we know that he's had health issues, but we haven't really heard anything detail-wise since then. So to see them lose and then him turn around and behaving like that in the post game, you just were a little bit worried that more was going on than we were privy to, and that's fine. We don't have to be privy to everything, but my gosh, if it's something serious, then that's what the concern would be. And you leave it open-ended like that, and you have a head coach who's like borderline crying after a loss, and it lets your imagination run wild, especially when said coach has had health issues recently. So I'm glad they cleared it up. I'm glad they made it clear that he's okay and that he's not going anywhere. I didn't think that he was, but I wondered if there was just a bigger picture problem going on that we weren't aware of. So to have that, wonder build up to the point where they felt the need to address it, it's good that they did, and I'm glad that he's all right. And I know it's been a tough year for Kansas State by their standards, but they are still going to win probably 8, 9, 10 games, and I think that's pretty much all you can bank on year to year if you're a K-State fan or a fan of most programs. I mean, anything more than that, and you're in a rare air, which they've been very successful, but I don't think any Big 12 programs in that stratosphere right now. 7-3, you are going to double up his worst year that he ever had, which was 4 wins back in the COVID season, and his worst seasons other than that are 8 wins. So you're going to hit that and probably surpass it because you've still got 3 games left. So you only need 1 more to match his lowest win total. I think you're living life pretty good in Manhattan, Kansas, but I get that expectations are high, especially after last year. But still, they're in a really good spot as a program, and I'm glad to know that he's going to be leading the way for a while.
John Kurtz again today at just after 5:10, around just after 5:10, just after 5 today with us on 365 Sports. Tom Fornelli put this out yesterday evening. I reached out to him and asked him if he was available because I agree with this comment, and there's different levels of how you could agree or not. I swear I was told the reason so many people wanted an expanded playoff was so we could prove it on the field. But now everybody seems to want to settle it with hypotheticals.
Well, that's what happens when the SEC collides, right? So the SEC's expansion, while it's worked out for them, now you've got a bunch of fan bases, 6 of them, as a matter of fact, that are right now, still on the hunt, all trying to measure their wins and your losses and what is better and what is not, and then try to say, look, well, this is better than any other conference and all that, when, I think the numbers will bear out that outside of one outlier schedule or 2, that, some teams have just juggernaut schedules, and some teams have schedules that look like they could be and then they turn into not. I mean, and that's not their fault, but dealing with the facts of the moment and not the facts of the past is going to be the biggest challenge for a lot of fans, the committee, people who follow college football, because it's never been like that. But now we're seeing, look, nobody rolls into Dallas anymore intimidated by Tom Landry, right? But for some reason, and so nobody thinks about, oh my God, Jerry Kramer played here at Lambeau Field. There's mystique, there's all that. They just go and they play. College football is going to be more like that. We're just not used to it yet. And the playoff will probably eventually turn in that direction more, because that's how it's going to go when you have more spots and free agency and all of that. So, yeah, it's not going to be hypothetical anymore, but people need to start thinking about how you think about, how did the Bengals go and beat the Chiefs? Well, they don't care. Like, they're not playing Len Dawson. It's different.
Yeah, I think that he's spot on there. I think that there's been a lot of excuse making for losing, and once again, the people, quote unquote, at the top of this sport want to find ways to make everything matter towards the end goal, but actually the results on the field. And this sport has always kind of been that way. You've always had people trying to, take advantage of the arguments about the strength of conferences or this or that, or my loss isn't as bad as yours. Like, none of that's to be unexpected. But I do think the larger conferences and the lack of actual crossover schedules where teams that are in this conversation are actually playing one another on a regular basis has led to a big batch of just similarly scheduled teams that all have the same records, and it's this big mess that hopefully gets sorted out in the next 2 or 3 weeks. But that's what happens when you move to larger conferences is these schedules aren't a bunch of head-to-heads between all the best. It's, as you're going to probably point out here in a second, like one team who's right in this conversation who's played like one of these other teams, and yet they're talking about how great their schedule is and their losses shouldn't matter as much. And we know there's only one conference that does this, and they've earned the right to do some of it. And if you talk about it, then you get told, well, what's your team won? And my team's in the SEC. They've won 7 national championships and more than a handful of Heismans, and so I've experienced winning at a very high level. Not this year, but I have faith that they'll be back at some point in time. So I'm technically an SEC guy. I cannot stand this conference chest, tapping that goes on constantly. I don't like it.
Pumping their chest out.
Pumping their chest out. I don't like it. I don't like it when the Big 12 does. I don't like when anybody does. I don't like the whole thing.
You're an Oklahoma fan.
Yeah.
You're not a fan of the 15 other teams in the league.
I'm not sitting there like, damn, man, I hope Tennessee wins so that we have 5 teams in the playoff. This is what I've been talking about.
Yeah.
I don't see that money. Like, I get for the Big 12, like, they're in a spot where, like, they need everybody to rally together because for so long they didn't have that. Like, it's understandable they've been on the brink of extinction multiple times. I really don't get it anywhere else. I really don't. Yeah. I get that you want to brag about having the best brand of football, but the way that people rally to, like, all ensure that 7 teams get in the playoff and you're all towing the company line about how, like, you walk on water and losses don't mean as much. I just think that's all bullshit.
Yeah.
I think that winning on the field should matter. I do think there are differences in schedules, but I think we get to a point where we got like 3 weeks left and you have teams that are, well, if we lose a 3rd game, that's still better than that team who lost 1 game. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like, what are we even talking about? How did we get a better playoff and somehow a worse argument for who should make the playoff? Because I think it's all so silly. I'm one who lets the games play themselves out. I'm one that your record is who you are. And I do think there are teams that have had more difficult schedules. I think that's, just part of the draw. You can't have everybody on a completely same plane, but this whole wrangling around trying to, force 6 teams into this playoff because of the conference they play, I just think it's all. I just think it sucks. I do. I think it sucks. I think Tom's got a great point that this should be getting settled on the field, but now it's all like, well, what if that, and what if, and it's like, I don't know. I just watched the games on Saturday and watched the wins losses. I'm not doing the hypothetical thing, so I'm with him on this.
One of the things that I get a lot is even if I retweet somebody who makes a comment that might point something near the SEC's territory or with a team, it's like, you mean to tell me BYU would be undefeated if they were a part of the SEC? They're not undefeated as a part of the Big 12, and they could have had 2 or 3 losses. I think this. I say this again. There was times when conferences were proud of who they were, whether it was the old Pac-12 or with the Big 8, for God's sakes, or the Southwest Conference, which went forever, though, without a national champion. The Big Ten's always kind of had this, holier-than-thou thought. And then the SEC has had a great run. But you can't guess what would happen unless you actually play the games. Now, here's a note. Speaking of that, Matt Hayes. Now, I know what's going to happen here because we're talking about the SEC. These teams are all really good, and perhaps everybody on this list could win the other conferences. I think that could happen. But 6 teams, it appears, trying to figure out who's going to go to the college football playoff. This is the one that startled me. And it's not your fault who teams are the year you play them. But Texas has played one of those 5 among Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Texas, and Texas A&M. And lost by 15 at home to Georgia. A&M hasn't played any of them. Now, again, that's part of the algorithm of how the conference schedule is released and how you play them. And next year, whoever you played this year at home, you'll play them on the road next year. I get all that. But that's kind of staggering. And then you know that Georgia's played Alabama. Georgia's played Ole Miss. Georgia's played Texas. And then, some teams have had tougher schedules than others. But that's Tom Fornelli, his thought. But it is supposed to be about how you prove yourself on the field and not about, but. And so glad we brought that up today.
Well, here's the other thing. part of the reason that the SEC doesn't want to prove it on the field, or the Big Ten, they're a little quieter about this, but that this feeling's the same, is that if you do prove it on the field and you lose,
we didn't want to be there.
Then
like
then
Georgia,
you can't.
Texas, and the Sugar Bowl.
Our backup right guard was hurt.
Yeah, I mean, like, then there are those. Those things.
It's
so
not like they're not dominant and they haven't won numerous national titles. But yeah, it's kind of interesting that if they lose a bowl game, we wanted to be in the championship game, so we're just kind of half-an-ass this week. That's not. That's so. You know what? You win your games you play.
Here's what the SEC is. They invented the light bulb when it came to the conference, like, promotion and all that. So they're Thomas Edison. That was the only place you could go get light bulbs for a while. And Thomas Edison, historically, every time somebody else said, I can make a better light bulb, he's like, the hell you can. And he would pull some stuff to, throw them off. He had a very huge rivalry with Nikola Tesla. All those things. So the SEC right now is Thomas Edison trying to stop everybody else from building their own light bulb.
Look, man, I think the SEC is the best conference in America, and I don't think it's particularly close. I think they could very well have 6 teams that deserve to be in the playoffs. So even if they were to get 5, some people might think that's too many. That might not be enough. I totally understand that rationale. I just am not on board with every time you have any mention of anybody else getting any little bit of a bite of something of the meal. It's like some hypothetical pops in. Well, you think Tennessee wouldn't beat BYU by 3? It's like, I don't know. Can we have them play? Like, you don't even want them to get in the playoff because you need 7 teams from the same league to get in. So, that's the thing is, let's settle it on the field, and more often than not, they have the bragging rights. They deserve it. But, yeah, all the hypothetical stuff, and I know we've got 3 losses, but you mean to tell me they wouldn't be favorites at Oklahoma? It's like that's the part of it that I know is mostly social media stuff, so that's why I basically stay off it entirely at this point, but That is what drives me mad, is if we did the hypothetical, guess what? There would never be a down year. And the way we've been programmed, there never is a down year, even when there is a down year, because it's just hypotheticals, and the louder crowd's always the one that typically sides with that side of things, and so it's just more of what you hear more often than not.
And it doesn't hurt when you have a network that is damn good at covering college football, that has their own best interest, and yet it doesn't always make sense because they also have rights to the ACC and the Big 12 and other conferences too. So the SEC conundrum goes, when you've been in a conference together for 124 years, it means more. Now, I know you're kind of joking. They started in 1932. How many of the teams that are a part of the conference now were there when they opened the conference in 1932?
Well, 4 of them for sure weren't.
Well,
Recent
Missouri, A&M, Texas, and Oklahoma. South Carolina wasn't, I don't believe.
Nope.
Alabama, Auburn, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, LSU, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and Tennessee and Vanderbilt. That's the one I could have named off. I think that's 8 or 9. I could have named those off because I can name out the old conference teams more than I can even sometimes the new ones. It's a different animal. Conference realignments changed that. It is a phenomenal conference. They've won a bucket load of national titles, and you can blame a lot of teams along the last 20 years or so for letting it go from a nice run to what has been almost a dynasty run within the conference itself.
It's all well-deserved, and a lot of the bragging rights are, and the passion is unmatched and unparalleled. All those things are true. It can also be true that it gets nauseating to hear it all the freaking time, and I think that's where a lot of people are, of where, oh, great, we got this expanded playoff, and now what happens as soon as we get started? These teams that maybe have a loss are pinned up against the deck like, you better not even sneeze wrong. You're out of the playoff. And then you watch, and there's multiple teams in that league that they've already got 2, and they're like, this is why we're better than the team that and that's the part that I think is just aggravating. It's understood. The greatness doesn't have to be, touched upon any further. Like, everybody acknowledges you're the best, but and you've also gone out and earned it, but it's just a matter of, can anybody else, breathe and have an opportunity without there being some sort of, fit thrown of why there's not 3 times more for you? It's exhausting, quite frankly.
Yeah, and the deal about, if BYU was in the SEC or whatever, but they're not. They're not. And they've only been in the Big 12, by the way, for a couple of years. And so, but if you're going to have a super conference, and we know you want to take over the world and you invented football, I get it, but Just a couple of notes. Tom Fornelli, I thought that made sense. There have been some weekends where I would not leave my TV. I mean, there have been one banger after another, 3, 4, 5 games in a row. But there have been a couple of weekends when you're like, I'm searching for something. Now, last weekend you had Georgia, Tennessee, and a couple of other games too, but not always just in the SEC. Here are the teams and their records against others in the what are called the P4 conferences and records against opponents who have winning records. And SMU has 4 of those wins. Bama has 4. Then you see some of the teams that, of course, also have not lost. Now, BYU, they now have the 3-1 because they just lost to Kansas. Notre Dame unbeaten. Their loss, though, was at Northern Illinois. So you look down that list. Not many people have more than either 0, 1, or 2 wins against other conferences, other teams in other power conferences who have winning records because there aren't that many that play each other. But SMU and Alabama at the very top.
And it's because of big conferences. It's hard. Like, it's going to be harder to get these because of the bigger conferences. You're going to have more scheduling like this where it's going to be feast or famine, and because rosters are going to turn over a lot heavier than they have in the past because of, all the new rules now. Yeah, it's going to be hard to say like, oh, we're definitely have at least 3 ranked. Like, I bet you Texas thought at the beginning of the year we're going to have at least 3 or 4 ranked wins because look at this schedule. I mean, but then at the end of it, you might wind up only having 1.
Yep.
And that might be A&M. So that's if A&M is even ranked. If A&M loses to Auburn, there's a good shot that they plummet. So
UT just announced they're going to have a home-and-home with Notre Dame at the end of the decade, which is awesome. They've always had something like that in their non-conference. It's not their fault. Michigan is the year after they had a phenomenal team.
But if you had told me that also SMU was going to have 4 ranked wins, I'd have been like, well, who's going to be ranked?
Yeah.
And
I still think there's a debate, Craig, you and Paul. Craig, you first. Is that should you get credit for where a team was ranked when you beat them, or should it be where they are when the season is over? Or should it just be, well, who was somebody ranked, let's say 12th, that's no longer ranked, and what happened to them?
I mean, it depends what argument am I trying to win. I mean, that's how it's applied. I mean, what am I trying to prove? That's the angle that I'll take. I don't know. I think that ultimately it should probably boil down to who's in there at the end when you're actually counting those wins that matter. Like, why would a top 25 win for some team that's not in the top 25 and hasn't been for 6 weeks count the same as one for a team that's in there right now?
Yeah.
When you've played 10 games and teams are actually who they are. Now, then here's a problem, like with everything else. Well, our quarterback was healthy then, and now he's not healthy, so it was a top 25 win then, but it wouldn't be. And so, like, that's where you get into this gray area where the conversation never really has a true end because there's all these variables. So, again, it depends on what you're trying to argue, I suppose. I think if you're starting to apply those, and let's say the committee rankings week 10, I think you apply the teams that are in there right this very moment. But I do know that you may have played the number 5 team and their quarterback got hurt, and they would be a top 5 team still, or at least a top 25, but if not for that injury. So that should still count, but it wouldn't. So, like, that's why, again, there's no exact way to do it where there's not an asterisk of some sort. So that's why everybody does with it what they want to do to win the argument that they have. But, yeah, I think it should be, if we're talking top 25 wins now, I think it should be probably the total just to cover all the bases versus, at the time, because then you do run the risk of those teams who, were rightfully so, but are no longer for whatever reason.
Here's an example. Oregon, unbeaten. They did survive against Wisconsin recently. And Wisconsin, remember, has been kind of a mess of late, but they won. No matter who you are, even the most dominant teams ever, maybe there's 5 in the last 25 years that just never were threatened. But for the most part, you're going to need a tip pass knockdown in the end zone or a last-second field goal against no matter what the record is. Oregon has wins officially for right now, based on the poll right now, against teams that are ranked in Ohio State and Illinois. Illinois was 20th when they beat them by 29. Ohio State was 2 when they beat them back, what was it, in September, 32-31. But guess what? They beat Boise State when they were unranked. And now Boise State's inside the top 15. So, to me, you get credit for that. You beat a team that was not top 25 when you played them, but they are right now. So that's how it can, like, it's almost like a, I don't know, like a slink.
I think you should get credit for the wins at the end of the year when it matters. Like, who are these people and who are they in their whole record? Because if you're giving, let's say Georgia Tech was in the playoff mix. They're not, but they have a win over the number 9 team in the country. Is that the number 9 team in the country they beat week 1 in Ireland? God, no.
No, that's a great point. They're 1-9.
Here's the thing. Yeah. So let people get exposed for being good or bad, then give them the credit for that and saying, well, they have these ranked wins now. That's also a misleading stat because, yeah, they've beaten these teams that are ranked, or is it a current ranking, or was it when they were? I prefer, okay, what are you right now? What are you at the end of the season? Just because that shows you.
It's who, no, you're right. It's who Florida State is this year, not who they've been the last 30 years, or Notre Dame, or Michigan, or whoever. It's who are they now?
I mean, so, look, when Miami beat Louisville only had 1 loss. Well, now they have 4 total losses. Yeah. So is that the same? Should that count the same? I don't know. I mean,
that's the problem. Is definitely the preseason rankings are a lot of times BS, and so you're getting credit for beating a team that had absolutely no business being in the top 25, but that carries you throughout the entire year and counts because they recruited well in the offseason. So you got a top 25 win from a team that didn't deserve to be there because a bunch of media that doesn't know, because you're just ranking teams based on nothing other than info. And
some of them are, yeah.
Well, I mean, nobody knows exactly.
No,
you're basing it off recruiting rankings and like the season before and who came back and who didn't. So there's a lot of teams that have absolutely no business being in that preseason top 25 that end up there, and that counts, like Florida State being a prime example of that. Should that count as a top 25 win at all at any time of year this year? Absolutely not. So, yeah, if you're going to do it any kind of way, then probably at the end of the year. But again, that'll just open the door to, well, Florida was ranked when we played them, but DJ Lagway broke his leg, and they've lost 3 straight, and now they're not in the top 25, but they were when we played them. So there's no perfect way to do it. I'd be more of a lean towards take the poll as it stands right now when you're doing the rankings each week, not what it's been over the entire haul. I think would be the best way to do it.
And Paxton, I know we all know you're a UT fan and you're passionate. That no one is saying that they don't and aren't among the best teams in the country. It would have been nice if they would have been tested a little bit, but maybe they're that good they don't have to be tested. But yes, playing in front of 110,000 in Ann Arbor and playing in front of 75,000 in Fayetteville, those are tests. There's no doubt about it. That's not really a part of the discussion, but I'm sure that may be something the committee, they lost or they only won by 10, but hey, Fayetteville's pretty tough to play. You have to, it becomes a beauty contest or a tradition-rich contest, a conundrum. I don't always agree with you at all, but it's a pretty good one. When they eventually do that SEC Big Ten scheduling agreement, it'll take care of all of that.
Yeah, it will. It absolutely will.
They close the door or a vault, done. Everyone's out.
Yeah. And look, again, going to Ann Arbor is tough. It's tough. It's a long trip from Austin. But look, 110,000 people in that stadium can be yelling. But if the one that needs to do the right thing for Michigan, and that's the quarterback, sucks out loud, and they have none of those guys, then that takes away the luster.
Get to that position?
I don't know, hubris. Thinking they had the guys.
Well, they miscalculated. I mean, Texas had Garrett Gilbert. Everybody wanted him, and look what happened with him. So maybe they missed on that. I'm looking at Michigan's schedule at home. Their losses have been at Washington, at Illinois, home against Oregon, and then at Indiana. So they have, for the most part, protected their home turf. It's like USC was once in the top 10. Who are they now? Even if you had beaten them early in the year. Congratulations. It's been a tough year at times for Clemson. They've weathered most of the storms. And I was watching last week. They're done, right? They're losing that game. And then all of a sudden I look up as I think I was trying to finish off a little bit of some sausage and queso dip. And there goes Cade Klubnik with a powerful, almost thoroughbred type of run to win that game and beat Pittsburgh 24-20. He is this week's Earl Campbell Tyler Rose Award Player of the Week. And what a game.
He's never won the weekly award before, right?
I don't know that. Craig,
I mean,
do you
he
remember?
might not this year. I don't even really agree with this one this week, but yeah, he hasn't won it this year. He had a good game, but I feel like it was some heroics at the end and not so much a great game overall compared to some others on that list who had like actually great overall games. Klubnik had a really nice game and played hero at the end with a long touchdown run. He wouldn't have been my choice, but yeah, that's his first player of the week this year. He's been up for it a few times, and he's had a really solid season, and he's much like Deion in Colorado or whatever offseason narratives we heard to death. Cade Klubnik has shut a lot of people up, and he's, along with his teammates, shut a lot of people up about not only him but about Clemson. So good for him, and yeah, I mean, I defer to the voters there. I just put the list together, but he's had a really good season so far.
I voted for Arizona State wide receiver Jordan Tyson for a couple of reasons.
That's who I would have voted for.
12 catches for 176 yards and 2 touchdowns in an upset win at Kansas State, if you want to say upset win, because Arizona State is fantastic too. And then I put a quote when I voted from Chris Klieman saying that Jordan Tyson is the best receiver he's seen in the conference. And I don't know if he meant the last 20 years or how long he's been a part of it, but he had a monster game and a big win too, and vaulted them inside the top 25. And there might have been 6 or 7 others that could have gotten the vote, but nothing against Klubnik. He had kind of a Heisman moment. He's not in that discussion with the run, but I had voted for Jordan Tyson of Arizona State.
Yeah, I saw J.J. Joe actually complaining on Twitter towards the Big 12 about Bryson Washington, quote-unquote, getting snubbed for Offensive Player of the Week. And I understand his points, but Bryson Washington plays running back and gets a lot more touches. And I think that if you were just to go the numbers game, then that's why the Heisman's always the quarterback or it's always the running back. And receivers have to go so above and beyond to get the same level of credit, even though they're getting far fewer touches. So, yeah, to me, 12 catches, 176 yards, and 2 touchdowns. No, that's not 4 touchdowns and a little over 200 yards, but it's 12 for 176 and 2 TDs. Like, how much better of a game can a wide receiver really have than that? And so, yeah, he's not going to be able to match Bryson Washington's nearly 30 touches and 200-plus all-purpose yards and 4 touchdowns, but he's also getting the ball less than half the time that Bryson Washington is. So I think with wide receivers, there's sometimes an unfair disadvantage where you just don't get the ball enough to match what people look at, and I've learned very quickly in doing award stuff is they don't look at the details. They don't look half the time at the opponent. They look at touchdowns and overall yardage and don't take into consideration, well, yeah, that guy had 45 attempts. That's why he's had 300 versus this guy who was 14 of 15 and had like 250. But they see the 300-plus yards and it's like, 300-plus yards. And so that's a definite downside to dealing with stuff like that sometimes. So, yeah, I probably would have voted Jordan Tyson, but I understand the vote for Klubnik. I just would have gone a different direction, but I'm glad that he's having such a solid year.
He's played really well this year. Part of it is, the schedule did work out for them early on where he kind of got on a roll and got some confidence. But the biggest thing was that Dabo Swinney actually let Garrett Riley run the Garrett Riley offense and not making Garrett Riley run the Dabo Swinney offense. That's, I think, was the big problem last year. They're a little bit better at the skill positions than they were a year ago. They still could get better all over the place, but Cade Klubnik is I think he's exactly what he was recruited to be, and he's really good. The supporting cast is not what Deshaun Watson had. That's to me is where Clemson's different.
I had to remember that Clemson actually 7-1 in the conference, SMU unbeaten, 6-0 for the Rhett Lashlee and the Mustangs, and Miami at 5-1. So they're in really, really good shape. They have South Carolina's in a rival game to close out the year, and they play the Citadel from South Carolina in a game coming up this weekend. Ashton Genty, Kim Coulter sent this to me last night, feeling very, very bombarded by me talking about Ashton Genty and how unbelievable he is. I have not voted yet for the Heisman Trophy. Honestly, I don't know who I'm going to vote for. I'm going to wait until the last day, and then I'll turn in my ballot. But I do think Ashton Genty, Travis Hunter, and a couple of others are absolutely going to be a part of my ballot. Ashton Genty, one time in the last decade, a running back has surpassed what is 100 forced missed tackles in 1 year. The great Bijan Robinson had 104 in 12 games in 2022. Ashton Jeanty has 105 in 10 games so far through 2024. Now, Kim and Paxton and a couple of others yesterday was, but again, what would he do against other type conferences, the Big Ten or whatever? Because, in my example, was against two top 25 teams. He has almost 400 yards combined, and I think 6, 7, or 8 touchdowns against Oregon, and then also against Washington State.
You know what he would do? He would do that. Maybe not to the level, but he would do something like that. If he was playing at Georgia, everyone would be like, this is the next Herschel Walker. Yeah. They'd be all over him. Talent is talent. And I promise you that dude, and we even know this, he's kind of said it, that people came at him, and said, hey, do you want to leave Boise State? He could have made a bunch of money going to a power conference and stayed at Boise State, and I'm sure he's taken care of well there in the Boise community, as he should be. But if he was in any other conference that it was in the power, it would be a legitimate, it would be a bigger question between him and Travis Hunter, because you wouldn't have that same he's at Boise State. With
all due respect to Boise State, they obviously have very good people on offense, but he would have even maybe better rated linemen around him. But that's not fair to Boise State.
In about 5 second halves.
Yeah. No, quite a bit. Craig?
I think he's definitely deserved all the attention that he's gotten and will be in New York, and I think that's, bare minimum what he's earned at this point. I do think Travis Hunter has been marketed better, and I do think people are more wowed by the dual threat nature of Travis Hunter. And I said this yesterday, and I didn't really probably deliver it as well as I could have because I didn't really know how to explain it, but I just feel like with Travis Hunter, we're just told how good he is on defense, but I don't know how many people really know how good, in the course of an actual game and the week to week, we see him catch his 1 or 2 touchdowns, right? We see him maybe get an interception or something, but we just go gaga over the entire game, and it's but did we ever count when he got beat by somebody? How does that count versus, because it's such a unique thing that it's not just stats, right? So it's for all we know, he could be having a bad game covering guys. Yeah. We just don't know that.
Yeah.
Because he just gets his touchdown at the end of the game and they win, and we're okay, well, he was great then, right? Right? And it's I don't know. Yeah. I'm not watching him cover guys on every single snap. So that's part of it to me that with Travis Hunter is I don't know how much we're paying attention to exactly how he's performing, but the stats are amazing and the highlights are great, and I'm not taking away from him at all. If he's the Heisman Trophy winner, I won't complain about that whatsoever, but I do think there is a marketing aspect to this that Ashton Jeanty does not have, and I think that's going to probably work against him in the long run, and the fact that he's from a smaller school. So,
well, you know what? They've got games to win, Colorado. He did have a couple of plays last week that were kind of if you wanted to look at a Heisman moment, you got to have those. Ashton Jeanty's got a few of those too.
But how many people could name his head coach?
Ashton
much
Jeanty?
Much less see his head coach on TV every week talking about him and giving the Heisman speech. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Or his quarterback, for that matter. How many people can name Boise's quarterback? I can, but I know most people can't. Mm-hmm. So, there's just such a different level of attention on Travis Hunter and a campaign behind it that Jeanty just simply does not have. He's the cute running back on the team that nobody respects to the same level they respect the quote-unquote power schools. So there's automatically a bias built in because he's not at a power school. So there's half an audience that's already not giving him full credit because he's playing weaker teams, right? And so there's already that you're going against. But then I think there's also just the machine that is Colorado and the fact that they are having so much success and the fact that Travis Hunter is, it feels like at least averaging a pick and a TD every week now at this point. So it's all amazing. But, I think that's going to be too much for Jeanty to overcome just doing what he's doing.
I would, and this is if I was just a college football fan, when players like Desmond Howard or Charles Woodson or Johnny Rodgers, and I may be missing 1 or 2 others, Tim Brown, won Heisman trophies, not that they were both ways, but there was that kick or punt return moment too. And I think Travis Hunter would probably have 2 or 3 of those if he was returning kicks or punts for Colorado. But
I'm not critiquing him in any way.
No,
I'm not taking away from him at all.
What happens is we see 3 or 4 really good players or teams, and we want to for some reason not acknowledge they're all really good, and we start to take little pot shots at everybody else. All right, we got a break. When we come back, we will discuss college football, the thoughts when it comes to the standings being released tonight, the Big 12 crazy, all of that and more. Shehan Jeyarajah is next. This is 365 Sports.
Pleasant. It's different than any other dentist office. I really feel like they care. And it's not that you're here for 2 hours waiting on someone to take care of you. It's quick and easy, and I bring my kids, and my kids love being here too. They really love the treasure box. Staff is really nice and accommodating, real friendly. You feel more like home. It's not sterile looking. Everybody has their own personalized rooms with decorations and decor, and they'll even have a blanket for you when it's cold. I've recommended people to actually come here, and they are patients now. I really love it here. It feels like family.
If you want quality and personalized service for all your air conditioning and heating needs, call Tradesman Services. They're a family-owned and operated company that has served Texans for over 30 years. Tradesman offers maintenance plans starting at just $12 per month and a free service call for all new customers. They're also experts in geothermal design, installation, and service. Visit them online at coolingwaco.com.
Another So-So Pizza from So-So's Pizza? But wait, there's Marco's! Our new triple pepperoni Magnifico pizza is stacked with classic, crispy cupped, and new bold shredded pepperoni. It's triple the flavor, and only at Marco's. Just $11.99.
I'll never get used to this. I'll never get used to this. This is how I wanna live. Forever we'll be singing like, oh, I'll never get used to this. I'll never get used to this. I'll never get used to this. This is how I wanna live. This is how I wanna live. Forever we'll be singing like, oh, I'll never get used to this.
Developed by Startup Waco, a nonprofit organization, GXG is a program designed to support the entrepreneurial development of Baylor University student athletes through NIL activations. The program helps student athletes maximize their platforms and offers a comprehensive support system for them to create and grow new businesses that not only benefit themselves, but also uplift the local economy. Fans who wish to support student athletes can donate to GXG via the GXG NIL Fund, BaylorBears.com/GXG. Contributions to support NIL activations through GXG can be made at BaylorBears.com/GXG. For more information, follow at GXG_GreenXGold on social media and visit the official website www.gxg.startupwaco.com. GXG, empowering student athlete entrepreneurship and uplifting the local economy through NIL activations.
Don't miss our best price deals during the Black Friday sales event at Allen Samuels. This month, save big on the truck you've been looking for, like the new Rams. Shop our great selection of inventory in store or online today at Allen Samuels in Waco.
This is 365 Sports.
The 3 o'clock hour is sponsored by Waco Custom Marketplace. Meats, sweets, Texas treats, and a cut above the rest. 425 Lake Air Drive, Waco.
On Tuesdays, we had Shehan on a couple of weeks ago, and then all of a sudden, he covers college football for CBS Sports. Asked him if he could come on during Tuesdays. So that gives us Ari Temkin on 340 Monday, Shehan at 340 Tuesday. Then Taylor McCarg joins us on Wednesdays at 340 from ESPN, and also CBS. Shehan Jeyarajah joins us now on 365 Sports. So what would you do when you look at wins against top 25 teams when they were ranked when you played them, compared to where they are now, How would you iron all that out with a vote?
Well, I think for me, the way that I view a team with more data is more relevant to me. Because, for example, I mean, you look earlier in the year, Tennessee played a team like Oklahoma that was top 15 in the country. Since then, they've pretty well proven that they're not a top 15 team in the country. Now, I do think that you can take into account a little bit, hey, this is how a team was playing, here's how a team was positioned back a couple weeks ago, but I certainly look at where they have ended up. The more data that we get, we learn more about these teams. And especially, again, when you look at some of these teams that were rated really highly in the preseason and how maybe they've communicated, like, for example, I'm not going to give Boston College credit for beating a really good top 25 Florida State team if I know that team is no longer top 25. So I think that you have to keep it moving. And I actually credit the committee a lot for doing that and kind of keeping it moving and really reevaluating every single week.
Yeah, well, they were number 9 when you beat them. Depends on, when that was. Week 1, and they've lost 9 games. Well, they were never really number 9, right? I mean, that's not how it works. We mentioned at the end of the show yesterday, but you had a very interesting tweet of every program that is the Owls has fired their coach. And among them, the most recent one is Tom Herman. And he's kind of had a meteoric drop from Texas to now getting fired at FAU. What do you think the realistic future is for him in college football, if there is one?
It's such a great question. And I know, you look back a couple years ago, especially after he was fired at Texas, he spent some time in the NFL. He was actually like a special projects consultant with the Chicago Bears. I wouldn't be shocked if he does a football-only type job and decides to go to the NFL level. I mean, the reality is people kind of viewed him as a coach who, when you look at him as a coordinator, and the word is he is potentially looking for coordinator jobs as well. But, you kind of see his rise up. He goes through Houston, is really successful there, goes to Texas, pretty successful there. Obviously doesn't get the job done, but I think does a very good job, gets him back to 10 wins for the first time in a little while. And for this flame out to happen at FAU, and for it to happen this quickly as well, is pretty unbelievable. I mean, this was a program that certainly hadn't lived up to expectations the past couple of years, but it's one that's won 10 games in recent memory. And Tom Herman just was completely unable to do that. So I think that in the short term, you're going to see him as a candidate for major offensive coordinator positions. I mean, a funny one would be if he did end up at Oklahoma, taking over as offensive coordinator over there and playing Texas next year in the Cotton Bowl. But I do also think that it's on the table for him to at least consider opportunities at the next level as well.
Shehan, since he brought up the coaching carousel, it's kind of quiet right now. I mean, I know there's been a couple of jobs, and as far as the major jobs going, it looks like it could sort of remain that way, barring any sort of surprises. One job that was thought to be potentially out there is the Baylor job, your alma mater, Dave Aranda. He's coming back. I was just curious your thoughts on that, and just are we in for a pretty quiet coaching carousel when all is said and done, you think, over the next few weeks?
Well, I think that it's very realistic that we don't have a single Power 4 coach fired. That's the direction that we're trending right now. The closest that I kind of see right now is Purdue's going to get really interesting. They've been miserable in 2 years under Ryan Walters. I think Neil Brown is safe, but there's going to be some heat on that end as well. There are a couple jobs that could open because of retirement. Mac Brown at North Carolina is always going to be a factor there. I think Sam Pittman at Arkansas has been rumored a little bit, but he pushed back when he was asked pretty recently. But, to talk about Baylor for a second, like their job in the preseason was get to 6 wins, get to the postseason, get to a bowl game. And after they fell to 2-4, I really thought it was going to be very difficult for them to do that. Well, they've rattled off 4 straight wins, of course, technically still alive in the Big 12 race. They're definitely jockeying for better bowl position. And I think that you have to give them a lot of credit for what they've done over the past couple of weeks. Jake Spavital, I think, has really elevated this offense in a big way. And you're starting to see development from players like Bryson Washington at running back, like Sawyer Robertson, who outside of Shedeur Sanders is maybe the best quarterback in the Big 12 right now. So it's not just the fact that they've gotten to 6 wins. I said to people before the year, I felt like they had to develop some playmakers who would be able to also come back in 2025 and make people excited. Sawyer Robertson is going to be one of those. Bryson Washington is going to be one of those. There are some guys, Josh Cameron at receiver, I think is a very exciting player as well. So I think that they're starting to not only find an identity on offense especially, but I think that they're also starting to develop some of these young guys. And when you look not just to 2024, but to 2025 and beyond, it really seems like Dave Aranda has pulled himself out of the tailspin.
Shehan, I tell you what, we see we're now just, a couple of weeks away, 2 or 3 weeks away with the championship games in the conferences, and it's mass chaos. It might just iron itself out, let it all play out. We don't even know who's going to win the Big 12 or play for the game. But in your opinion, is there any way, based on BYU losing last week to Kansas, that they get more than one team in the college football playoff?
No, I don't see any way at this point. And honestly, I think that they're at more risk of dropping out entirely at this point than getting 2 teams in. And the reason I say that is we'll see the rankings tonight. That's obviously going to be up in the air. But if you look at the AP, I mean, BYU fell to 14 or 15. Like, they're way out of the field. Colorado is right on the edge there in the 17 range. Arizona State kind of bringing up the rear in the 20s range. And I expect that that's what it's going to be tonight whenever the college football playoff rankings come out. But I don't think that any second team is going to be able to climb their way up. Now, I have a huge issue with the AP and how far they dropped BYU. I mean, I don't understand the logic of dropping them so far behind Miami, but I don't really understand how college football has treated Miami and BYU so differently, really, since they were both undefeated even. But I do think that that right now, I mean, the job for the Big 12 is going to be get in front of Boise State, stay in front of Army or Tulane. And again, I think that that's even a little bit more up in the air than it was a couple weeks ago.
I want to go back to Neil Brown. Why do you think, in particular, Neil Brown is safe? Because the fans would disagree with you wholeheartedly.
Well, I do think that the way actually, let me take it even a little bit further back. So last year, after their 9-win season, West Virginia decided to give Neil Brown an extension, and it was kind of a compromise extension. It did give him a little bit more money. It increased his buyout for the 2024 season, but it actually lessened his buyout for the 2025 season. So I think the plan has always been at West Virginia, we're going to ride out 2024. Hopefully things don't go wrong, and they've gone a little wrong. But then in 2025, we can make our real decision on him. At this point, I think that it's just going to be a lot for West Virginia to give up on him. And the other piece, too, is I don't necessarily know that there's obvious great coaching candidates out there as well. And, I think that at West Virginia, look, the thing for Neil Brown is that he's never had that true drop-off. But I think that at a certain point, Ren Baker, their athletic director, is going to have to make a tough decision. I don't think it's going to come this year. And the other piece, too, when you talk about a slow carousel for Power 4 coaches, I want people to understand this. A big part of it is the House v. NCAA case. Nobody knows at this point exactly how this is all going to be administered. They don't know the timeline. They don't know exactly how much money they're going to need. People don't want to deal with the instability. And that's why you're not seeing any programs make coaching changes. They want to ride out this 2024 postseason cycle. Next year, maybe they can reset. Maybe we have a crazy busy carousel next year, but nobody wants to be the first one. And the other piece, too, is that nobody knows exactly how a 12-team playoff is going to impact just the timing of the coaching carousel, because you don't know, are assistant coaches or potentially even head coaches not going to be available because they're still coaching in the playoff. I think it's a huge dynamic to keep an eye on, and nobody wants to be the first team to do it.
So when it comes to tonight, we talked about BYU and the Big 12 at large, also where Boise State fits. What are kind of the 2 or 3 biggest things you're looking out for tonight, just big picture CFP?
Well, the conversation over the past couple of days, especially on social media, has been about the SEC's place in the college football playoff. And I think that the most consequential team to be ranked will be Tennessee. Tennessee at this point has a win over Alabama, but then they have 2 losses, one to Arkansas, one by 2 touchdowns to Georgia. I don't think that their case overall is amazing. So it'll be interesting to see. Do we see them in the 10-11 range, which would be firmly in the field? Do we see them more in the 13-14 range where they probably wouldn't be able to rise up from after that? This, I think, is going to be the ranking where we figure out, can the SEC get 4 or will it be 5? And I think that similarly, where exactly Indiana lands in this ranking, they've been top 5 before, but if they're able to even continue to trend upwards, that's going to put them in an interesting position as a potential 11-1 team if they were to lose to Ohio State. Look, if Indiana beats Ohio State, not only are they in, they're either the 1 or 2 seed. If they lose, though, as an 11-1 team, I think that their case becomes a little murkier. So it's going to be a lot of jockeying between those two leagues and those two positions. I think the other thing, too, to keep an eye on is BYU versus Miami and versus SMU and also Boise State. If you see BYU in the more Miami range of the 10, 11, 12, I think that they should feel really good about that. I think that if you have them 2 or 3 spots behind Boise State, 2 or 3 spots behind SMU and potentially Miami, that's, again, a little bit of a warning sign. And the other piece of this as well is going to be how high does Army move up in advance of their game against Notre Dame? Now, I feel like Army probably needs to beat Notre Dame to put the Big 12 at risk of getting left out completely, and I don't anticipate that's going to happen. But you want to make sure that you have a little bit of wiggle room just in case disaster strikes.
I know that this is more of like a sports bar or talk show, so here I am with you, and we are talking with you about if Indiana loses to Ohio State, and I don't care if it's 10 or 17 points, but I understand people could look at a game and a score differently. But if they do that, are they out? And secondly, would they be out if it was another name other than Indiana on their jersey?
It's a great question. It's a really, really good question. I think that from my perspective, you kind of go back and forth on their case, right? Because I want people to understand from an analytic perspective, when you talk about these computer models, Indiana rates really well because they have beaten almost every single one of their opponents by more than 14 points. Now, they haven't played great opponents, but they've destroyed them. And now you head into a game against Ohio State. Look, if they get beat the way that they beat, for example, Nebraska earlier in the year, 56-7, that's going to make the case a little hard. If it's a very competitive game that Ohio State pulls away from, I think they're still going to have a really good case. And, you have to start sitting here and making the comparison to other teams. Because, for example, how do you rate them against a team like Notre Dame, who also hasn't played a very tough schedule, but has the Texas A&M win, but also, by the way, has the Northern Illinois loss? How do you compare them versus a team like Tennessee, which has the Alabama win, but also has an Arkansas loss and doesn't have an especially great schedule outside of that? So I do think that they should be okay. I mean, the precedent, frankly, even if you're the Big Ten, of an 11-1 team getting left out of the field, I think is tough, a little tough to stomach. But I do think that I do feel like they're going to be in the field even if they lose this game, as long as they don't get absolutely destroyed.
Do you have a Heisman vote, Shehan?
I do not. You
do not. Okay, then you can just tell us right now, 2-3 weeks left in the year, what's your ballot?
Yeah, good question. So I think that, to me, it's a 2-man race right now. I think it's between Travis Hunter and Ashton Jeanty. I lean Travis Hunter right now. The thing that's always going to be interesting with Travis Hunter is I think that it's actually the defensive stuff that really needs to kind of come through. He got a 3rd interception last week. I think that'll help his case quite a bit, just because cornerback's not a position where you really get to rack up many stats. You kind of just look at like PFF coverage grade and kind of just have to use eye test in some ways. And that's a tough thing to do for a vote that obviously is nearly 1,000 people. Offensively, of course, I mean, he is top 15 receiver in college football, top 10 in receptions. He's got, I believe it's 10 total offensive touchdowns at this point. I think that he's been excellent enough at both positions that I do think that he's the front runner right now. And by the way, it doesn't hurt that Colorado has been way better than anybody expected, and he's a huge part of that. Ashton Jeanty would definitely be at worst my number 2. His numbers are just absolutely insane, and he also is potentially maybe leading a college football playoff team. I think in my number 3 spot, I would go Cam Ward at Miami. I think that he, as a quarterback, probably carries more load than any other quarterback in college football right now. And when you look at Miami going from pretty average team in 2023 to playoff contender in 2024, I think that he's been at the center of it. So that would be my top 3 right now: Hunter, Jeanty, and then Cam Ward at number 3.
Would it help? Travis Hunter, of course, we know the what he's done. I brought this up in the last segment. Charles Woodson, Tim Brown, Johnny Rodgers, who am I missing? Desmond Howard. They all had returns for touchdowns in some way. and I might be forgetting one or two others. Would that not just seal the deal if he would have had one of those two?
Well, I think that he plays so much more receiver than almost any of those guys did as cornerbacks. So I don't think he needs it. Now, look, if you score touchdowns as an offensive player, obviously you get interceptions as a defensive player, and then you score special teams touchdowns as well. I think that does maybe just ice it. But I think that his volume is big enough with his play as a receiver and his play as a cornerback that he should be okay. I mean, again, when we talk about these two-way guys, and there are multiple guys who have been good offensive players. I mean, Champ Bailey also comes to mind. But like he is like one of the top 10 receivers in the country. He was one of the 11 semifinalists for the Bolitnikov that was just released as well. So to be that level of offensive player and that level of defensive player, I think that he can do without the special teams. But it certainly wouldn't have hurt his case.
Shehan, thank you, man. Paul, anything else? Nope. Craig? All right. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Love having you on. When we get you on Tuesdays. You too. All right. From CBS Sports, Shehan Jeyarajah with us on 365 Sports. Just around the corner. We're not done. We'll have the Big 12 North Pod. Kansas, Kansas State, Iowa State, West Virginia. Pat Smith, three-man front on the SEC, the race to who's going to, one, play for the conference title, but also all the other, I guess you could say, juggling or positioning of what else is happening. John Kurtz after Craig's off the radar. John McClain, Hall of Fame columnist on the Texans and Cowboys last night, and Paul Catalina's Top 5. This is 365 Sports. So Baylor's on the road again this week down in Houston. There is a really large contingent of Baylor alums in some of the biggest cities around America: Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, and L.A., Washington, D.C. There are other areas around the country that have a large contingent of Baylor alums. It's not a massive university, but they do have their pockets where people are there. And in Houston, so they're going to have a tailgate down there before the game on Saturday evening against the Cougars. And there'll be other events too, because there are so many alums in that area, and Baylor's playing on Saturday. So having said that, you want to be somewhere where they're going to have something going on? You have your own tailgate party that's going on? You want to find out where everything is going to be? Or you want to promote what you have that may not be a part of what around the stadium is going to be like? Maybe at a sports bar, restaurant, or wherever else, somewhere in the Houston area. Contact Doug Furch or Paul Thorpe. You can go to Facebook and look at Baylor Alumni Fan Engagement. Go to Baylor.edu and look them up too. They can help you spread the word or let you know what else is going on. It's Baylor Alumni Fan Engagement.
Score big savings at the Kickoff the Savings event at Richard Carr Buick, a 2024 Car and Driver Magazine Editor's Choice. The all-new Buick Envista starts at only $23,990. Or make the winning drive in a 2024 Buick Encore GX SUV and save $4,000 for non-GM car owners. Or save $1,000 on 2024 Buick Envisions in stock. Qualified buyers get 0.9% financing and no payments for 90 days. Score your deal at the Kickoff the Savings event going on now at Richard Carr Buick.
At Richard Carr, we give you more.
Edward Jones Financial Advisors Josh Satterfield and John Maddox understand these are difficult and changing times we live in, but they know how important your financial investments are to you. So is your financial advisor staying in touch with you and helping you navigate today's financial climate? When you invest with Edward Jones Financial Advisors Josh Satterfield, John Maddox, and Sean Carter, they will provide their time and experience to help you reach your goals. And like coaching athletes, investing money is about time, patience, and encouragement. Josh Satterfield and Sean Carter on Wycon Road off Bagby, and John Maddox on Sapphire Boulevard in Hewitt. Proud sponsors of Midway Panthers football. Edward Jones, making sense of investing. Membership SIPC.
El Conquistador Restaurants are a very proud sponsor of the Midway Panthers, have been owned and operated by the Gonzalez family since 1969. El Conquistador is recognized annually as a local favorite with their fast and friendly service. Dine in or order takeout and enjoy your favorite Tex-Mex items as well as several traditional menu items. Catering is also available with 3 locations to serve you: Waco, Belmead, and Hillsboro. The Gonzalez family thanks you in Waco and the surrounding area for your continued support of 55 years in business. Go Panthers!
Developed by Startup Waco, a nonprofit organization, GXG is a program designed to support the entrepreneurial development of Baylor University student-athletes through NIL activations. The program helps student-athletes maximize their platforms and offers a comprehensive support system for them to create and grow new businesses that not only benefit themselves, but also uplift the local economy. Fans who wish to support student-athletes can donate to GXG via the GXG NIL Fund, BaylorBears.com/GXG. Contributions to support NIL activations through GXG can be made at BaylorBears.com/GXG. For more information, follow @GXG_GreenXGold on social media and visit the official website www.gxg.startupwaco.com. GXG, empowering student-athlete entrepreneurship and uplifting the local economy through NIL activations.
Parenting is full of surprises.
You never know what to expect.
So after our son was born, I called my Texas Farm Bureau insurance agent to set up a life insurance policy in case something happened to me.
Sawyer is now 2.
And we'll soon have a sister. There's no one else I would trust with protecting my family.
Stop by and see our agents at one of our 3 McLennan County locations.
Coverage and discounts are subject to qualifications and policy terms and may vary by situation.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com. This segment is brought to you by Michelob Ultra. It's only worth it if you enjoy it. Containing only 95 calories and 2.6 carbs.
Big 12 football and everybody else. 2 weeks left in the regular season, then conference championships. Of course, Army-Navy is December the 14th and just around the corner. And, of course, Army now still with a very much a shot at trying to run the table, although very much heavy underdogs as well against Notre Dame. The Big 12 North Pod, there are 16 teams. We cut it into 4. Yesterday we looked at 4 in the South, the 4 in the North, Kansas, Kansas State, Iowa State, and West Virginia. Let's start with Kansas. They've gotten kind of hot, disappointing year because of all the expectations, but they've now won a couple of games against good people, and let's start with Kansas and Lance Leipold.
Yeah, they've started to play well, and Jalen Daniels has started to look like himself, and all of a sudden everybody's going to hate Jeff Grimes as much as they did at the beginning of the year, but they still look. They've got some tough ones on the way out. But if they can keep rolling, they got to win, these 2 to get to a bowl game. Maybe they've shaken off their bad luck from earlier in the year. I kind of half expected it to pop up because the game against BYU was so close that, okay, well, it's 17-13, but this is going to be 2017 with 9 seconds left because some weird stuff happened, and it didn't. So, yeah, I'm interested to see how they play down the stretch these last 2 games. Especially if they win this week, that game on the 30th here against Baylor is going to be really, really interesting because they'll have a lot on the line for that one.
Yeah, they've been one of the hottest teams in the country, and I think that is going to stick. I don't know if it results in going and beating Colorado or beating Baylor, but I do think they're going to continue to play well. And I think the schedule, obviously, early on was a bit too much, especially when Jalen Daniels was still in very much a recuperation or rehabilitation or just reinvigoration type of mode where clearly he wasn't back to being the guy that we expected. And that's the thing, when you're making predictions, you don't know that Jalen Daniels isn't going to be even 80% for like the first 5 weeks of the season when you're predicting Kansas is going to be 3rd in the Big 12 or whatever. So those are just variables that you don't really have on hand unless you're Lance Leipold, and they didn't shy away from the expectations even then. But I do think that, the first half of the season probably went even worse than they could ever have anticipated, even with Jalen Daniels not quite at 100%, because there was plenty of others coming back that thought that led you to believe that you could go and win more than you did. So they lost a bunch of those games early on, 5 in a row to be exact, after getting that first win. But when you looked at them, they were all in a lot of the cases all very close games. And so you're just looking at that like, well, damn, if they could just get a little bit of luck, they might actually be right in the thick of this thing, and that's what's happened the last month. They've had a little bit more luck. They've also gone out and taken it like they did against Houston, and they had the K-State obviously debacle, but that was right there for the taking as well. So, yeah, I just think it's a good to solid team that had a little bit of bad luck early. That's starting to turn, and Jalen Daniels is playing better, and they're getting wins. And now they're making it very interesting here at the end. I think the Colorado game being at home makes that even more intriguing, and I think they're going to give Colorado plenty to handle this weekend. I'm not predicting an upset, but I do think that it ought to be highly competitive like most Big 12 games are. So this is an opportunity for them to really jump up and make a lot of noise. And, yeah, if they win this game, then they'd have one more to try to win 6, and that'd be a really big deal to get bowl eligible after starting off the season 1-5 to even be in that position. For all the bad talk about Lance Leipold or if he's really got it or not, or about whatever you wanted to pinpoint, they've shut a lot of people up over the last month and could really shut a lot of people up in the next couple of weeks.
I got an interesting part about their schedule. Bear with me here. They lost to Illinois. They're ranked in one poll but not in another, but they've been ranked, right?
Yep.
Has UNLV been ranked at all throughout the year? Did they sneak into the top 20 to 25 range?
I don't remember if they actually have been ranked at any point, but yeah, they were in that conversation.
West Virginia?
No.
TCU?
No.
Arizona State now. Kansas State, when they lost by 2, was 16th. They just beat 17th ranked and 6th ranked Iowa State and BYU, and they're about to play 17th ranked Colorado. They have had a deceiving schedule, but they have a chance to win 3 straight against top 20 teams if they can beat Colorado at home on Saturday afternoon.
UNLV's in this poll right now, so yeah,
I mean, that's a pretty dicey little schedule, but again, not that still what we expected from Kansas, but and they've got some close losses, 3 and 4 and 4 and then 2. So maybe they just were a lot better despite what your record says you are.
I think that's the case. I think that's absolutely what happened. And, yeah, UNLV's ranked right now, so that counts. And it's a pretty difficult schedule. I think that was kind of thought to be the case going in. But I also think that some perspectives had that as being a bit of an easier schedule. And, yeah, you just never know. You never know how it shakes out. And so it turned out to be one heck of a ride, and they've had their flat tires and their broken windshields and all that, and they've seemingly repaired most of it, and now they're cruising again, and it's just a matter of to where. But they've got it all in front of them, and I think if, again, they were to make a bowl game somehow, that would be a remarkable turnaround and really something to talk about.
All right, so there we have it with Kansas as a part of the Big 12 North.
And what was most impressive about that win was that it was defensive, and they got the big break on the punt fumble. That was a huge break, and they probably don't win that game without that. I mean, I think that's probably fair to say because that was such a swing, such a massive swing in that game. But they played it tight. The defense kept them in it, and, that's a very encouraging sign because so much is talked about when it comes to the offense, but that was very much a game where they had to grit it out and just make one extra play, and they were able to do that on special teams with a little bit of help from their opponent. But regardless, you'll take that. And that was a great win out in Provo, but it wasn't totally unexpected because we brought it up a couple times last week that, hey, Kansas is hot right now. BYU's not. Better be careful. And not always right, but in that case, you saw the signs in writing.
You could almost tell early on that this thing was going to be a typical BYU game. Not typical. They've won some games going away, but it was going to be Kansas was there, no doubt, and locked in. And then there's Iowa State after back-to-back losses at home against Texas Tech and then at Kansas by 10. They beat Cincinnati, looked good doing it. That game was a little bit touch and go early, but then they kind of separated. Now they're on the road against Utah, 6:30 Saturday night on Fox.
Yeah, Isaac Wilson had some moments in that game last week that showed the potential that he has. So that's going to be more of a challenge for Iowa State maybe than I would have thought of a week ago. But I still think that, the line's about right. Iowa State 7.5. I think they probably even, they cover that plus there. I think they might have shaken off their doldrums a little bit. Of course, you play close games, you're going to lose some close games, and they've done that now. But I do think Iowa State and Rocco Becht, really like watching him play. He's a gamer. They've got some really good skill players. I expect Iowa State to win this one and not be particularly close.
Yeah, I mean, they pulled away in the second half. That was a tight ball game, and they made the most of their opportunities. And Didn't have any like crazy type of game offensively, but just punched it in when they had the opportunity to do so there in the third and fourth quarter, and that took them the way that they needed to go in terms of just getting back on the winning track. So nice win over Cincy. Didn't have to sweat that one too much. I still think there's obviously a lot that they're battling in terms of injuries and just the week-to-week grind, but they're still really well positioned. They unfortunately, with that second loss, took fate out of their own hands, but they're still an outside shot with a couple weeks to go. They're one of those teams that's looking at like, hey, if chaos were to hit, we could be in Arlington somehow. It's not, like I said, fully in their control, but what is going out and beating Utah and Salt Lake City, and I think they have every reason to believe that they can go and do that, and anything other than that would be a massive disappointment, because then you're looking at being, 8-3, which is still a pretty good year, but then you got K-State the week after that, so with 8-4, and I don't even know if 9-3 feels all that great, honestly. So, just based on where you were at the start of the season and having started off 7-0. I'm very curious to see how they travel out there, but I fully expect them to get a win and be in that mix to win, 9 regular season games, if not 10 regular season games. That's still out there for them. And, if chaos breaks loose, you take care of your business, then maybe you get that call to Arlington because Arizona State jumps up and bites Colorado, or BYU loses, Arizona State jumps up and bites BYU, right? That's who they're playing this week. And then Colorado gets knocked off by Kansas, and then next thing you know, here you are. And
in this league, who knows?
Yeah, next thing you know, you're right there. So just take care of your business and hope for a little bit of luck. But a lot of stuff still in front of you, like it always has been.
The minute you're feeling good in the Big 12 is the minute somebody comes.
Anytime you start feeling like you smell pretty good, then you better watch out, because there's teams that are getting hot that were not in good shape, like KU, like Baylor. You've had some that have been up and down, including one we're about to talk about. There was a picture at the end of the game in Morgantown that was damning, and one that I'm sure Ren Baker didn't like, and I know some fans even brought it to my attention, where you saw parts of the stadium that were empty, like a clump of 12 fans. Yeah, one, they're getting their asses kicked. At the same time, it's West Virginia, and they have a very, very good fan base. About the time you think, this is an example, about the time you think you know who they are, they win back-to-back games on the road at Arizona, Cincinnati, after losing badly at home against Iowa State and Kansas State.
Well, they're losing games at home now, constantly.
In 49-35, second half. It was a very 49-35. This was a 14. It's like the Texas Tech game with Baylor won. It was not that close if you look at the score.
No, and that last touchdown was kind of,
forget the last touchdown. The Garrett Green touchdown right before the half. He never got in the end zone.
Yeah.
That was a very fortunate call that made that a one-score game going into halftime. That should have been a 14-point game, and really Baylor just eventually pulled away the way they were kind of looked like they should have all along, but that kept it closer for a while longer than it probably would have been.
But the reason I keep asking people who are in the know, like Shehan a second ago, and I get the reasoning, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's still there, but Neil Brown's not only losing at home, they're getting curb stomped at home. They're losing bad. And then he floated out the, you should be having a good time. Everybody's got a couple pops in them, right? The kids are out there, should be fun. Well, no, it's not fun to watch your team. It's not they're losing close games at home. The conferences come in here. Iowa State's drilled them at home. Baylor's drilled them at home. They've gotten beaten at home really badly, and that's where you really start to lose people. And look, if not for Baylor's turn, like Dave Aranda can send him here's the toolkit, because he was losing badly at home a lot until very, very recently, and that's the thing I think that drives people up the wall the most. You lose when they're not paying tickets to see you and they're just watching on TV. They'll be mad. You lose when they take their whole day and sit there. They get really mad. And that was going on at Baylor until Dave Aranda turned it around. Neil Brown has the same problem right now.
They've lost 3 straight at home. They've won 2 games at home all year out of 6. So, the once mighty Morgantown, I'm sure there's still elements of that, but it's not the fortress that it used to be, the big, bad, haunted house. Same thing with Boone Pickens. That used to be like, oh, man, got to go Stillwater. Who cares now? I mean, I'm sure that once they get good again, it'll be that way. But this year it hasn't been that way for either one of those programs. And even Kansas went and said, Provo what? Like, we'll just roll into there on Saturday night. We don't give a damn. So, yeah, I mean, this league is crazy. But typically programs like West Virginia have had strong home field, and that's not the case. And I think that just kind of plays into the overall narrative sort of going on right now. I mentioned that, not to take away from West Virginia, but that Garrett Green touchdown was very questionable. I mean, very questionable. And if you had a higher level broadcast with different cameras, might not have scored that touchdown because you actually had a real pylon cam. Regardless, he gets the credit for that, and they keep the game close. But eventually Baylor pulled away, and I don't think there was any doubt they were the better team on Saturday. I don't think there was any question whatsoever, even if you're the most diehard Mountaineer fan in the world. There's no way you looked at that game and go, yeah, West Virginia should have beaten them. They were a bit, absolutely no way you could have seen that. So I just don't know what you're really holding on to right now. That's all that great. You're not winning home games. All the big home games that you get excited for, you get pumped up for, they put the cool promotions on it. You've lost all of those games. Garrett Green comes back from injury after you got to see the little bit of the youngster and Marchiol, and he's fine. He had a pretty good game against Baylor.
Hold on just a second. You hear what he just said? He's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a good quarterback, but he's not great. I mean, he's not, and so he's cool. He's fine. He's if you want to play 500-ish football, then hey, you're gonna get that done. But it's not like anything that's exciting. It's not like, oh man, Garrett Green's back, guys. Like now we're gonna go on a run. It's like, oh, all right, cool, I guess. I don't know. I really like watching Nico, though. Like, that's what I'm talking about. And so there's not even that element now. So you're kind of just back to Garrett Green, which a lot of people have already just sort of gotten over that. There's just not a lot of positives, point being. And I do think if you're looking for some, you should beat UCF at home this weekend, and you should get bowl eligible. And I do think it's kind of harder to fire guys if they're getting bowl eligible and making the postseason. Now, if you're a program that's you just bare minimum do that every week, then that could be something that doesn't matter as much in the long run. But I do think it is something that matters. That is something that is still out there in front of them, and I would anticipate them doing that at home against UCF this weekend. But boy, oh boy, if they don't, they drop another home game and they lose to UCF, then you suddenly get into a situation where you've got to win your last game to get bowl eligible, and that's at Texas Tech. I mean, I just don't know. Like you're skating on thin ice right now if you're Neil Brown.
No, you mentioned it. You took away a little bit of what I was going to mention. They haven't played a lot lately, but they lost that game to Pittsburgh. It's still one hell of a rivalry. They've played like 60-something times, even though they had not played until the last 3 seasons for a decade. And then, of course, the Penn State series, which is heavily favored towards Penn State, a game that had all sorts of, lead up. And they get smoked in that game. So those are 2 games where there was at least hope in the fan base that maybe they could win one of those 2. But, yeah, they're losing at home. West Virginia fans are great. I'm not into, like, firing coaches, but you just wonder how things shake out with just a couple of weeks left in the season. West Virginia now is 5-5. They just need to win a game. As you said, Craig, to get to a bowl game. And there's no reason why they can't win at home against UCF. And then again, the game on the road against Texas Tech might be a little bit more interesting. UCF's another team, although not in the pod, where you thought they were dead and buried. Then they won a game, and then you cannot say, okay, I know who that is. Is there anybody in the Big 12 right now? I think Arizona State and Colorado would be 1 and 2 that you know exactly their personality and who they are.
No. I mean, who their personality is, I guess Colorado, what you said, but outside of, a couple, no, because they're not, nobody's been
Some
super
are building
consistent.
that because remember we would talk about this, whether we're at the home games or doing pregame or postgame, is Baylor didn't have an identity, right? Yeah. They didn't have an identity. And look, you now kind of see what they have, an identity. We're going to have John Kurtz on in the 5 o'clock hour. Do you want to wait for K-State for that one, get to Pat Smith, or you want to do K-State right now?
Do K-State.
All right, K-State, we know Chris Klieman. It's been a tough stretch. They're still a good football team. It's like they haven't just forgotten how to win, but because of what was in front of them, losing that game at Houston gave them no room for error. after losing and getting beat up earlier in the year by BYU, and then they turn around. Arizona State goes in there. It was 24-0. It could have been worse, and punched them right in the nose and did to them what K-State, when they're really good and have their identity, do to other people.
Yeah, they absolutely let K-State just come right at them in that first half, and defensively they locked down on them in the second half, but really couldn't move the ball enough to get back in the game. I mean, they made it close. It was 24-14, but yeah, that's why it was so disappointing that they lost that game, and that's not the first time it's happened to them this year. Where they kind of got taken off their feet. Like, obviously BYU did it to them, but yeah, they're Kansas State to me is a team who clearly is a year away. Because, if you were there, you wouldn't lose a game to Houston. Now, ASU and BYU are two of the top teams in the conference. That's fine, but you wouldn't lose like they have the last couple, lose that game to Houston. If you were really ready, those games you would take care of, and they're just not there yet. I think they win this week against Cincinnati, but next week against Farmageddon, that is going to be a doozy.
Well, it was a terrible showing on offense in the first half. I mean, Avery Johnson's basically throwing a pick as soon as the game starts. So that was a nice tone setter. And then you turn the ball over twice on downs. You have a fumble, the interception that I mentioned, and then a punt. So you had interception right as the game starts, turnover on downs, punt, fumble, turnover on downs. That is your first half offensive drive. So, yeah, that's not going to win many games. And Arizona State able to take advantage and move the football and put points on the board, just dug way too much of a hole, then came out in the second half, added to it with another field goal, and 24 was all that they needed. And so for Kansas State, you just have to start better. You have to play a bit cleaner. Avery Johnson, has to protect the football. The little things, I think, are the things that are kind of getting away from them a little bit, and certainly hurt them the other night. So I think they're fine in terms of, big picture worries. I don't think there's anything to be overly concerned about, especially since they've kind of cleared up the questions about Chris Klieman and his just answers the other night. And so now that that's been put to the side and there's no impending resignation or any big thing down the pipeline, they just need to settle in, just play better football. I think that's the big thing. I do think that they probably got a bit too much hype for this year. So I'll be guilty as that, on that, like everybody else who pumped them up. But they were still right there towards the top of the standings, so it wasn't too overdone. They just, didn't play well the other night, and they haven't played well during a stretch of games now. And I think that the back-to-back losses are certainly extremely unexpected, especially at Houston and Arizona State in particular. There's just no way on the preseason schedule you would have circled probably either one of those games as losses, much less as back-to-back losses. So they're going through it right now, but they're still a solid team, and I do expect them to bounce back at home and beat Cincinnati and send their seniors out the way they wanted to the other night with a big win.
All right, what's the game, Craig and Paul, that you play? Paul, we've done that media group. Craig wasn't there when Scott Drew was the top seed.
Oh, yeah, the Connect Four?
Isn't that what the Big 12 is?
Yeah, I mean, you
drop it, and sometimes it stops, and sometimes it goes down 3 or 4 slots. That's just me. That's my old man. Look, there's a duck moment. That's who they remind me of. They're just up topsy-turvy in K-State. You lose a game, you could drop 5 spots. You win a game, you could vault over 3 or 4 teams. We've seen that happen. But still, they're dead in the water as far. Can they get to the Big 12 championship game? There are all of the teams at 4-3. Crazy. Baylor even, Kansas State, TCU, Tech, West Virginia, who mathematically are not dead in the water. Now, that could happen and be over with everybody other than BYU and Colorado after this weekend coming up. All right, when we come back, Pat Smith, 3-man front, does a great job of covering the SEC. We've discussed him quite a bit as everybody scrambles to try to get to a championship game. Or is Lane Kiffin right that maybe you don't want to play in the championship game? Greg Sankey right that you shouldn't be penalized if you lose in the championship game? All of that and more with Pat Smith. He's next. This is 365 Sports. Don Shumidor and Coffee Beans went by there the other day. I went to go see Joshua and also Cheyenne. 48-foot walk-in humidor with Cohiba, Macanudo, Padron, Arturo Fuente. My favorite brand of cigar is Rocky Patel. And they also have the wall inside their 48-foot walk-in humidor that's loaded up with all of the Texas brands, the Texas made cigars. And a lot of those cigars are also from veterans who have now started their own cigar companies. Mikhailov is one of the ones that is a very, very popular brand. And then on top of that, they have the coffee beans, the favorite. I think they mentioned, I know for sure, Cowboy, the fresh ground coffee, so they have that. Let's say the story that I told you about 3 or 4 months ago, a couple that listens or watches this show, they had a pipe. The guy smoked a pipe, and there was something wrong with it. He brought it down. They fixed it, and when he was here, he bought another pipe or two. So if you do smoke, that's old school. If you not that if you smoke it, you're old school, but that's back in the day, and some people still do smoke the pipes. And on top of that, if you do smoke cigars, they have torch lighters. They have the cutters and more. They have the pouches to keep your cigars where they should be, humidified inside of whatever you have when it comes to the humidor. And Vita Dreams. It's a CBD product that helps you kind of calm down at night, fall asleep, and get a full night's rest. How many times when you wake up, man, if you would have had just 30 more minutes, you didn't toss and turn, or an hour, you would feel better and more rested. Don Humidor and Coffee Beans in the Townwest Shopping Center in between Richland Drive and Valley Mills in Waco.
Do you or your kids get nervous about going to the dentist? Stonewood Dental, Dr. Steve Childress, he can help.
I've spent a career taking care of patients who as children had bad experiences, and now they're adults that hate going to the dentist. If I get a kid at 3 years old and they come every 6 months and it's a happy experience, it's normal for them. Now they have an accident at 6 or 7 or 8 at school. Now they have a broken tooth or a trauma, and they have to come here. They're used to lights, they're used to water in their mouth, they're used to experience, they already trust us. It's amazing what we can do with that kid without it being a negative thing. But if I see a 6 or 7 or 8 year old that's never been to the dentist, and now they have a trauma or an unfortunate unexpected toothache, it's harder to do that for that kid and it not be somewhat of a negative experience. So bottom line is I try to teach kids and adults and teenagers and everybody the way I'd want my family treated, which is where it's a necessary part of life. You just take care of it. It doesn't have to be that big a deal.
Learn more, stonewood-dental.com.
At Ideal MRI, we feel blessed to be part of the Waco community. We're a small family business here in Central Texas. At times like this, the cost of healthcare has never been more important. And unfortunately, significant illnesses and injuries still occur. And that's why Ideal MRI is open and here to serve you through this difficult time. So if you need an MRI, ask your doctor about Ideal MRI. You can schedule online in minutes at idealmri.com or call 833-IDEAL-MRI.
Pioneer Steel and Pipe opened their doors in 1943, and they have never wavered with their focus on great product and customer service, relationships with a handshake, making sure you, the customer, is satisfied. Their new facility is now twice the size, allowing new inventory, higher quantities, and in a much more organized fashion. In addition to the long lengths in tubing, angles, channels, rods, and flat, Pioneer Steel and Pipe now offers several shorter, more convenient lengths of material already cut. Their 2,500 square foot showroom has over 1,000 new products in stock, new welding supplies, hardware, quickcrete, and do-it-yourself components for any project, whether you are a professional contractor or weekend warrior. The new facility is designed to make your loading experience faster and more efficient with easy drive lanes around the building and much more room to get your trailer loaded. Our location may have changed, but our values haven't, and our relationship with customers goes much farther than just business. Pioneer Steel and Pipe on Loop 340 and Highway 6 and just east of I-35 in Waco.
Some say a dog is a man's best friend. But I tell you what, boys, you better think again. 'Cause there ain't nothing better than some cows, pigs, and turkeys too. I love to cover them in sauce down at Rudy's Barbecue.
Bring all your friends to Rudy's for some tasty oak smoke barbecue.
Next in line.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com.
The 4 o'clock hour is sponsored by Boozer's Jewelers, the wedding ring store, specializing in custom jewelry and repair, all in-house.
Now here's David Smoak, Paul Catalina, and Craig Smoak.
Pat Smith, you can find him on Twitter at Pat Smith Radio. It's a great follow. Also, co-host of Three Man Front, among many things, and the mothership of a lot of talk radio, WJOX, as well. Pat, thank you for your time with Craig and Paul. David Smoak. So is there, like, the SEC is very good about protecting their own. It's like, I can fight with my brother, but you don't need to fight with my brother, right? But they're very good about protecting their own and being very, very proud. Are we about to see some bloodshed among others, picking and choosing who should be a part of the college football playoff from within the conference?
Well, I give it another week or two, and I think you're probably going to start seeing it because they're hoping that a lot of stuff's going to get settled on the field. But when you go down to the fourth tiebreaker to try to figure out who's going to play in Atlanta, listen, you guys are used to this in the Big 12. You guys were the first one to say, you know what, we're going to play everybody. We're going to have 9 conference games, and we're not going to deal with all this other kind of BS that SEC now is having to deal with because they got rid of divisions. And so it has been a colossal mess. But just give it another week or two, and you already hear Greg Sankey. He went on the Paul Feinbaum show last week, and he basically was saying, look, you should not be penalized for going to play in your conference championship game and lose. So that was kind of setting the stage for the likes of an Alabama or possibly a Georgia. If they got to the SEC championship game and they lose and take that third loss, there was already the politicking going on. But you're already hearing Lane Kiffin say some stuff yesterday, and you've heard Kirby after the game against Tennessee the other night. Yeah, just give it another week or two, and it's going to be like a good old-fashioned family Thanksgiving gone awry.
On that, Why? I mean, obviously now he has to deal with it, but he would not die on that hill for any other conference for going to your championship game and losing. He said it's more of a reward just getting there. Well, that's not the song he sang before.
No. I mean, it's not. I mean, see, last year when Florida State was playing in the ACC championship, and then, of course, the day after when the CFP selection came out, it's going to be very fascinating because you've got Tony Petitti, you got Greg Sankey, both having the meeting of the minds this summer in Nashville. These two conferences, they want at least 4 automatic bids. There's a lot of talk about what's going on, that if the SEC doesn't get their 4 in, or if the Big Ten doesn't get their allotted number, whatever the case may be, this year or next year, that the SEC and the Big Ten are going to take their ball and they're going to go home. I mean, that's just the general feeling in my neck of the woods. I mean, nothing official, but it's just the fact that that's why the SEC has not committed to go to 9 conference games. They want to have this as a test balloon to look at what the college football playoff expansion is going to look like. Let's see how the committee reacts. Let's see how they will vote, and we'll see how it shakes out. But at the end of the day, the Big Ten and the SEC both hold those major cards, and if it doesn't turn out the way they want it to over the next 2 years, then look for them to really strong arm and to get what they want in the next rendition of the college football playoff.
Who is the best team playing right now in the SEC, toss records aside?
Oh, man. Oh, wow. I would probably say Ole Miss. And the reason why is because they found their mojo offensively of the last 2 games against, again, it was Arkansas, but you saw what they did against Georgia. This is a big game coming up down in the swamp. But their defensive front, it's the best that money could buy in the transfer portal. Those dudes have just absolutely 47 sacks on the year. Pete Golden, the defensive coordinator, has just done an incredible job. But who wouldn't with that type of talent that they've been able to get out of the portal? So I'd say right now, because both sides of the ball, they're just playing really, really well. So I would have to say it's Ole Miss at this current moment.
Yeah, everybody's beating everybody, and yet I saw a note where Texas has the one game with Georgia, lost by 15. A&M hasn't played any of these teams, have they? Have they played any of the ones in the mix right now at the top, although that's about to change in 2 weeks when they host UT?
That's correct. You know, they're in my state this weekend playing the Auburn Tigers, and they're only a 2.5-point favorite against a very bad Auburn football team. So it will be very interesting to see what happens. A lot of people on my radio show, you know, they'll call in every day and they want to know what Greg Sankey and the University of Texas, what kind of deal they struck, because the schedule that the University of Texas has been one of the weaker ones we've seen in quite some time in the Southeastern Conference. It was almost like, hey, welcome to the SEC, and by the way, we're going to give you the likes of playing Kentucky and a very bad Florida team and Mississippi. Oh, by the way, we're going to throw in Mississippi State. So outside of the Georgia game, they really haven't been tested that much. So it's going to be interesting to see if they get to Atlanta and whoever they end up playing, and perhaps it is a rematch against Alabama from last year at Bryant-Denny Stadium. That would be very interesting to see because let's just be honest, neither Texas A&M or Texas have played the type of schedule like the Georgia Bulldogs have.
Pat, do you think A&M has the juice to not only beat Texas, should they beat Auburn this week, like you said, only 2.5-point favorite, but then to turn around a week later and beat whoever it would be in the SEC title game?
I tell you, I mean, it's very difficult to win on the road in this conference. Going to Jordan-Hare at night, that is going to be a tough task for Texas A&M. Is Texas A&M a better football team than Auburn? Yes. But a lot of weird things happen at Jordan-Hare Stadium at night. Ask Georgia. Ask Alabama. A lot of really, really – it's a very tough place to play when those fans are amped up. So, yeah, I would say that is a very, very difficult task because you got to get through Auburn. Then you come home and you obviously got the game that everybody's been waiting for a very long time. I think right now Vegas has it as that Texas is a 7.5-point favorite on the early lines that was established, I think, by FanDuel a couple days ago. And if you get past that, then you're probably going to play, as of right now, the University of Alabama. And so going in there and having to go up against an Alabama team that has kind of righted the ship and Jalen Milroe playing the type of football he's been playing, defense has been really well for Alabama over the course of the last 5 games. They've been your turnover machine. They've forced at least 3 turnovers in 5 straight games. They're third nationally in that category. They're playing very well right now. So it will be a tough task for Texas A&M, but if you can get to Atlanta and you've got a shot, again, that's such a spectacle game, and with the CFP on the line, I think Aggies have the team to do it. It's just a very tough road to hold.
Pat, who is the most annoying fan base in the SEC, and why is it Tennessee?
Oh, wow. Wow. Well, fired. You know what? I will tell you this. There's been no love lost between Tennessee and Alabama. Of course, once Nick Saban came to Alabama, because Tennessee under Phil Fulmer, Peyton Manning, they went on about a 6 or 7 game run against Alabama. Then all of a sudden, Saban got there, only lost 1 time in 17 years against Tennessee. But Heupel's done a really nice job. But it's just been interesting listening to the whining by the Tennessee fans over the course of the last few days because they're getting amped up because they're like, okay, so you mean to tell me that we beat Alabama head-to-head, and so the CFP committee is going to take an Alabama team that we beat, and they're going to put them in over us. That what's wrong with that? Well, if you look at Tennessee's schedule, currently there is only one Power 4 team on their schedule that is above 500 that they have beaten. I really wish the CFP would release the strength of schedule for all of these teams. I was on a webinar with the CFP about a month ago, and we were all astonished that was on that call because we asked the question, hey, what about transparency? Can we get the strength of schedule? Can we get this? Can we get that? And we were told resoundingly no, that they were outsourcing the strength of schedule, and that data was not going to be available. But they would tell us that there's 12 different data sets that's involved with the strength of schedule, but they cannot release that to us. So we were like, now hold on a second. Now that's going to be a problem moving forward because it's, ultimately going to be a problem because you're going to have number 10, number 11, number 12, number 13 wondering, okay, why did we not get picked? Why were we chosen over this school? And they can't explain it to us. So I wish they would be more transparent in what's going on. But the Tennessee fans, they're going to be the ones that's really going to be going crazy, maybe even starting tonight once these rankings come out.
Well, look, transparency is never a thing that they value. It's never been a thing that they valued, Pat.
True.
And so now that you have more, like before it was just really 1 or 2 teams that you had to be mad about. Now it might be 4 to 5 that you throw that out there, and that's more that people have to be. And then it's maybe not 4 to 5, but years from now, like 3 years from now, it might be 20 teams who, when you are transparent, are like, wait a minute, now you're changing the rules. If they are transparent, then they can't have any kind of narrative.
True. And again, we've got ACC fans that will call our show. And, of course, they immediately go into the ESPN. This is what ESPN wants because they want, to set up the SEC. But the ACC fans forget that ESPN has the contract with the ACC as well. So that kind of dies on the vine. But I go back to the original question you guys asked me about the SEC eating their own. It's going to be, again, guys, having a situation to where if Alabama ends up in Atlanta and they lose that game and they're sitting there with 3 losses, and then Tennessee either doesn't get in or Ole Miss doesn't get in with only 2 losses during the regular season, then you're going to see all sorts of chaos. I mean, if you thought FSU fans were bad, you wait until Tennessee or Ole Miss fans get pissed off. Then all of a sudden, we got all sorts of a holy war going on in the Deep South. That's for sure.
I know what I'm rooting for now.
Yeah.
I want that. I want to see it. I want to see it.
One of the things is that, there are logos and helmets and tradition or whatever, but you're talking about a group of about Ole Miss. They're not a part of that. I know they're good. They're really, really good. Heck, they might be the best team. Who knows? But when you look at Georgia, Alabama, and Texas as teams that are all fighting for this, and most likely all 3 will get in some way, but you have Tennessee that's a pretty history, tradition-rich program, and thank God if it's LSU or Florida who have their history not even a part of this. This is going to be fun to see who starts pointing the fingers at the others. Do you think that will happen? I know you said wait another week or 2.
No, listen, no, it absolutely will. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, matter of fact, I go back to something I said earlier about Lane Kiffin. He said at his press conference yesterday that he's already talked to these coaches around the league, and they don't even want to go play in a SEC conference championship game. So he's trying to dilute the fact that there's no way that Ole Miss is going to, unless you get major chaos and upsets over the next 2 weeks, there's no way that Ole Miss has a path to get to Atlanta. And so he's already diluting the game and saying it's not important. It's not the way it used to be. All these coaches supposedly want to take the week off so they can get ready for the CFP. That's been the debate in Birmingham has been, okay, does Alabama really want to work it out to where they can, win and get to Atlanta and then have to face either Texas or Texas A&M or even a Georgia and then perhaps take that 3rd loss? What is that going to do in regards to their availability to go play in the CFP? So these coaches are already laying the groundwork for the argument. Now, I haven't heard a lot from Steve Sarkisian, but Lane Kiffin, listen, one thing's for sure, this is setting up for a potential, a situation in Gainesville because every time Lane Kiffin has had a little bit of success over in Oxford, he will open his mouth, he'll shoot himself in the foot, and the football team won't play well. See LSU earlier this year. So he just cannot exist with success in Oxford. So he's got to be careful this week, but he's the first one that's already saying what he's been saying in regards to maybe laying the groundwork for that SEC championship game not being the way it needs to be or should be.
Pat, one team that does not have to worry at all about being in this cluster of the playoff conversation is LSU. 3 straight losses, 4 on the year. And you say, oh, well, they got Vanderbilt this weekend. Well, hey, who knows, right? What do you think about just the situation in general there? How untenable is it with Brian Kelly? And just your thoughts on what we've seen from the Tigers at this stage.
Well, I tell you what, it's been a complete embarrassment. When you look at what Brian Kelly has had at his disposal and what he has done with less, you think about them. They lose to a bad USC team. They should have lost to South Carolina if Lenore Sellers, the quarterback, didn't get hurt. They never led Ole Miss until the final play of the game. They were destroyed by Texas A&M in the second half. Alabama destroyed them for 4 quarters. Then you go to the Swamp and lose to one of the worst Florida teams in recent memory. So you tell me, outside of the fact that you owe him $60.8 million to get rid of him at LSU, why in the world would anybody be excited about Brian Kelly and what he's doing? Zero. This was a team a month ago that we were already sliding into being one of the most exciting offenses. Hey, they've righted the defense. They're not 110 in total defense. They're a top 50 defense. Look what they're doing. And then all of a sudden, you got Texas A&M. That happened. And then Bama comes in and slaps them around. It's a situation to where I'm not really sure what's going on down there, but I promise you, those people down in the Bayou, they will not stand for this. It's basically the Notre Dame or the northern version of Ed Orgeron. You think of Orgeron and Les Miles both won national championships at LSU. And here we are going into year 4, and Brian Kelly has not even come close to sniffing or putting LSU in a situation of potentially playing for a national championship.
Who and what fan base among the SEC brethren, and I include, of course, Texas and Oklahoma, are, in your opinion, the most impatient, if you listed 1 through maybe 3 or 4?
I will tell you, based on the first 6 games of the season, it probably is the University of Alabama. Alabama's been spoiled. Nick Saban, what he was able to do to come to Tuscaloosa. I mean, guys, we were having daily conversations on our show after they lost to Vanderbilt. Well, they lost to Vanderbilt because, he doesn't wear a collared shirt. He wears a hoodie. Talking about Kalen DeBoer. They play music at practice. Nick Saban never allowed music to be played. He brought an ice cream truck during fall camp one day after practice. And it's like all these things that you would think nothing about started bubbling up. And it reminded me of before Nick Saban, when we had the likes of, obviously, Mike Shula and Dennis Franchione and all these guys in Tuscaloosa, because this fandom, God bless Kalen DeBoer and his family for them taking the job. But if he has any kind of maybe the next 2 weeks or if they miss out on an opportunity to get to the college football playoff, I promise you the patience level at Tuscaloosa may outbeat all of those other schools that you mentioned in the SEC.
Pat, great stuff, man. You're the best. Appreciate your time, what you do to cover the SEC, and thanks for joining us when you can.
Hey, just pray for continued chaos so I can keep paying my bills.
I am too. We are too. Yeah, we all are. Thank you very much, Pat Smith. Three man low, and then also three-man front. Excuse me. We had that guest on yesterday with Mark Schipper, and it gets me confused. And of course, a part of WJOX in Birmingham. When we come back, Craig Smoak and Off the Radar, John Kurtz, John McClain, also Paul Catalina's Top 5. This is 365 Sports. Marco's Pizza, fastest growing pizza brand in America, 5 locations in Waco, and I'm sure there is one near you. If you've not had Marco's Pizza, fastest growing pizza brand in America, there's a reason for that. You could also go online if you would like to order. I've done that before, ordered online, and of course had it delivered to where I live at the condo. And there's been a couple of different times when I was driving around and I said, I'll go by there and pick it up. Even after a high school game, even though it was getting close, of course, pizza places stay open. It depends on where they are, but they stay open plenty of time, so I got a pizza to take home with me after a high school broadcast. Marco's Pizza. Pizza lovers get it at marcos.com.
If you want quality and personalized service for all your air conditioning and heating needs, call Tradesman Services. They're a family-owned and operated company that has served Texans for over 30 years. Tradesman offers maintenance plans starting at just $12 per month and a free service call for all new customers. They're also experts in geothermal design, installation, and service. Visit them online at coolingwaco.com.
Established in 2007 and independently owned, Alliance Bank Central Texas is committed to helping families and businesses meet their financial goals. From their tellers to their board of directors, they know the importance of superior service and competitive products. Customers have confidence knowing that their financial needs are in good hands. It's your bank, Alliance Bank Central Texas, with 2 Waco locations, 4721 Bosque Boulevard and 191 Archway Drive on Highway 84, and at alliancebanktexas.com. Member FDIC and equal housing lender.
Hi, I'm Mark Stewart with Bird Colgan Ford. It's that time of year, it's football season. Bird Colgan Ford is a proud supporter of the best high school football right here in Central Texas. BK Ford is proud to sell the #1 selling truck in Texas, the F-Series truck, 47 years in a row. Come see the largest showroom in Texas and experience better at Bird Colgan Ford.
Riverbend Liquor and Wine now has 2 locations to serve you. The original on Lakeshore Drive in North 19th Street and the brand new spot in downtown Waco at 600 Franklin Avenue. If you're looking for the best in craft beers or local Texas bourbons, then the original is the place to be. And for the latest trends and online phenomenons, head downtown to the Franklin location. Either way, you're going to get the same great variety, customer service, and speedy experience. Check out both locations on their Facebook and Instagram pages. Riverbend Liquor and Wine, Lakeshore Drive in North 19th Street, and now downtown on Franklin Avenue.
This is Craig Smoak's Off the Radar, presented by Alliance Bank. They take pride in making banking easy. AllianceBankTexas.com.
Welcome in Off the Radar here on 365 Sports, Tuesdays, Thursdays at around 4:45 or just whenever, and a grab bag of stories each time to just get out there that we might not otherwise talk about, or just pass along, and fun things to discuss as well. Just all kind of depends on the news cycle. And typically a couple of these headlines I'm about to get to would be in our rundown, but they've just kind of come down over the last hour or so, or one of them I know we just didn't simply get to. But I do want to start off with a couple of those college football notes before we get off the radar, because I think they're interesting to talk about. And the first one is that Oregon has clinched a spot in the title game like 3 days after their last game. They have been now announced as having clinched a spot in the Big Ten championship game. It's Tuesday, guys. This should have been known on Saturday, but it's Tuesday. Well, the reason why is because I guess there was a comprehensive evaluation, according to the conference in a news release, of all the possible scenarios with 2 weeks to play across the regular season, involving all of the teams, all 18 in the Big Ten. And the league determined after this comprehensive evaluation that there are 0 conditions where Oregon will not finish number 1 or number 2. So you would have thought they probably would have known that based on, like, hey, if this shakes out this way, we'll have something determined. But no, it took them a couple days to realize, oh, wait a second. Oregon's clinched a spot in the Big Ten championship game. Damn. So on a random Tuesday, congrats, Ducks. You're in the Big Ten championship game. First year in the Big Ten, and they might win the Big Ten title, which is mightily impressive for Dan Lanning and company. But
damn,
they also in that release mentioned, like, all of the other tiebreaker scenarios, the other 3 teams that are in play. Obviously, unbeaten Indiana. You've got Ohio State, whose only loss is to Oregon, and you've also got Penn State, whose only loss is to Ohio State. So there will be an elimination this weekend in some form or fashion, because Ohio State and Indiana play this weekend, so that will break some of this up. But yeah, just sort of random that Oregon is just sitting at the office today, and they're like, oh, damn, we got to start looking at plane tickets.
So they don't even get – I don't know if they would celebrate that, but that's an accomplishment. It's a threshold, and they don't even know it.
Hey,
just keep winning, man.
First year in the conference, and you're already – in the title game. I mean, that's a big deal. They were fixtures in the Pac-12 title game, but they weren't exactly, nobody really ran that league for a long time. I mean, Oregon was the best team consistently, but I wouldn't say that they were, running the league. No. So for them to jump into the Big Ten in year one, already be in this spot, also have, the greatest schedule in the world where they can get their scare. Then they take a week off before they play Washington. So they've got that nice little thing before the Big Ten championship game. But for them, this is, again, when you expand the conferences these big and you have this, you're going to have times where the conference and you don't even realize, oh, crap. Hey, what do you know about that?
Yeah, so they will play December 7th at Lucas Oil Stadium. They're off this week. And then it's Washington, as Paul said, to close it out. But, yeah, they will play in the Big Ten championship game against either Ohio State, Indiana, or Penn State. But it will most likely be Ohio State or Indiana, who, again, play this weekend. And Penn State, they can technically get in, but it's like this. They need, like, a lot to happen. It's not just they need, like, certain combination of losses. So Penn State's an outside shot. But Oregon will be in Indianapolis on December the 7th. So there is that note. Also, I thought this was interesting from Deion Sanders. This came out while we were already in the midst of that first hour. I talked a little bit yesterday about just the future, and you wonder with Deion about like what the conversation is going to start turning into with Shedeur moving on and Travis Hunter moving on, and the fact that they've had such great success, and now his guys are going to be leaving, and because of that success, because of the name, how attractive will he be to other programs? Well, hell, you got Michael Irvin's on Colin Cowherd, which talk about a combination I will never watch. I will, like, you want to make me just pull my eyelashes out, then have me watch Michael Irvin and Colin Cowherd. But there was a segment from that show that went viral, I guess you could say, talking about Deion as head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, who we will get to. But that's not why I'm bringing him up. I'm bringing him up because he was quoted today as saying, when asked about his future, including the fact that there's rumors swirling about the Dallas Cowboys job, he said, "I'm happy where I am, man. I've got a kickstand down." You know what a kickstand is? That means I'm resting. I'm good. I'm happy. I'm excited. I'm enthusiastic about where I am. I love it here. I truly do. Now, anybody who's ever played the coaching carousel game goes, he didn't say no. Yeah. He didn't say I would never take it. But he said it says a lot about what we plan on being and the stability that we're going to be here for a while. We ain't going nowhere. We're about to get comfortable. So this also coincides with the Julian Lewis news and the potential they could land him, and a lot of young players who are playing well. So what do you think, Deion, and just the rumor mill and the fact that he's kind of, as much as a coach possibly can, other than saying, like, here's my contract that states I cannot possibly leave under any circumstances. Do you believe he's got the kickstand down in Boulder, Colorado?
I don't think he's, forsaken all others. I do think, though, that he's happy there. And look, if he gets Julian Lewis, if that's going to happen, then, yeah, I mean, he probably is. I mean, the biggest thing right now is, he's got to find a life where he doesn't get to make the quarterback or 50% of it, because he donated 50% of that DNA to the quarterback. It's not going to happen anytime soon unless he, I don't know. Well,
you mentioned that Julian Lewis is coming in. Isn't he coming in because Deion is there?
Yeah. So, and he could leave.
Well, if he does, he's not for sure.
Yeah. I also don't completely buy into that Jerry would want Deion there. I don't know if that's something that Jerry could take. Although he and Deion get along, but he and Deion get along because he and Deion can see each other once in a while.
Yeah, well, I'll get to the Cowboys here in a second. So that was just interesting, though, from Deion. I mean, that's a pretty firm statement to say all that he said about staying in Colorado. And, yeah, what's the transition? That's just what I've been curious about is there's obviously the very close ties there. I mean, it's your son playing quarterback for you the last few years, including at two different schools. And then, obviously, Travis Hunter's a very close person to him as well. So, with those guys moving on, you just sort of wonder. But it does seem like in college football this year, it's going to be a little bit lesser of a carousel than it typically has been. So maybe there's not just a bunch of jobs that are opened up. But also Notre Dame and Texas is scheduled a home and home for 2028 and 2029. I just think that's a cool note. They last played in 2016. Charlie Strong outdueling Brian Kelly.
Remember that game?
50-47 down in Austin. Texas is back. Gus Johnson said.
Was it Gus Johnson or Tessitore?
Tessitore, yeah.
Tessitore.
Yeah, now the voice of Monday Night Raw, Joe Tessitore. But, I got him confused. Texas is back. I know Gus Johnson has said that at some point in time, though. I can hear it in my head.
I think everybody in America has.
Yeah, pretty much. But they last met in 2016 with UT getting the win. Played 12 times. Notre Dame's won 9 of those, so they will rekindle that 28 and 29, and there's your mega matchups in the non-con, which you can never say that either one of those programs runs away from those. They embrace them, so I just think that's a cool matchup that we're going to get to see sooner rather than later. This isn't 2041, and I don't think you're going to see teams scheduling that far out because nobody knows what the hell they're scheduling for.
Yep.
Especially if there's some type of Big Ten scheduling crossover with the SEC, then that's it's probably it's entirely unpredictable. So, next thing, those Dallas Cowboys. How about them last night? Getting beat up on Monday Night Football. I am so tired of watching Cooper Rush, but I know that the alternative is clearly not better in Trey Lance, so it is what it is for the remainder of this season. But the moment you got guys like Zach Martin start going down, it's just like, all right, the wheels are entirely off this thing. 34-10. Houston beats the Cowboys in AT&T Stadium after a whole debacle where they were going to open the roof finally, and then metal falls from the roof. Luckily, it doesn't kill anybody. They have to close the roof. It's just like it's one thing after another. So now it is 3-7 for those Dallas Cowboys. And Paul, just what are you thinking at this point?
Well, look, this is a really, really bad team. They were always going to be bad. They made no effort to make the team better in the offseason. I mean, just the Zeke Elliott move alone tells you that they weren't interested in doing that. It's a lame duck year for Mike McCarthy. It sucks for him, but look, they lost Dan Quinn, who I think was the energy of the coaching staff, and you see what he's brought to Washington already. It's energy. They're missing that. Mike Zimmer and Mike McCarthy are two alike. Like, where's the energy? Like, where's the – they don't have it. Like, I think I like coaching staffs that have a bunch of different personalities. I think that works because then a coach can go, okay, this is my guy who's going to get him fired up. This is my guy who's going to X and O him. This is all that. I don't know if they really have that. They're like a really boring, bland coaching staff, which sometimes I guess you need, but they're not innovative. They're not new. Jerry was not trying to win this year. The all-in thing made it seem like they were going to do something, and then they proceeded to do nothing.
What do you mean he wasn't trying to win?
He wasn't going out of his way. He wasn't going out of his way. He was kind of let it go so they could, rework these contracts again, which they could have done at any time that they wanted to. They know what the math is going to be, but they're so bad at it. They're so bad at the functions of running the team. Draft pick compensation, salary cap, all of that. So bad at it. And they're not going to get better at it as long as Jerry's running things. And for that matter, I'll tell you, probably not as long as Steven's running things.
I think Jerry the GM should fire, or Jerry the owner should fire Jerry the GM.
You
ever heard that before?
And here's the last thing I'll say.
Yeah.
Here's the last thing I'll say. Jerry has always been a great owner, but a terrible GM, right? He's always been the best owner. Now I don't think he's that good of an owner. I think he's lost his touch there too. When you're yelling about the windows and you're yelling at the radio hosts, that's not good owner stuff.
It's a cranky old man.
Yeah.
There's very much cranky old man stuff going on right now. That's for damn
How
sure.
could anyone ever get that way?
It happens. I can't wait to be a cranky old man.
No, you can.
I can't. Look, here's the deal. I can't wait to go, like my dad did, go check the mailbox in his underwear. And when you tell him, hey, Dad, he's like, I've earned this.
Yeah, you did. No, he's right. You do earn that. You have rings around the tree.
Yeah.
They were bad last night. And here's the thing. There was a time there when it was like, 14-7 or 20-10.
They hung around.
When the game was and then, of course, the play that was tipped when Cooper Rush had a ball batted away, and then Guyton picked it up, and then Jalen Petrie, former Baylor star, just like exploded into his body, and he got screwed on a call in that game. And the ball comes loose. They run it back for a touchdown. That's over. Game's over.
Yeah, he did not have targeting. I'll tell you, here's the other thing that drives me nuts, is the whole Trey Lance thing. They traded a fourth-round pick for this guy, which means, look, unless he's just tragically awful, which I don't think he's tragically awful, I just don't think he lives up to being the third pick in the draft, that means you don't bring back Cooper Rush. You don't. You give him the opportunity to be the backup, but instead they stopped his progress by keeping Cooper Rush on the roster.
Well, Jerry said that he actually saw improvement from Cooper Rush last night on his weekly radio show, and so it sounds as though Trey Lance is on the back burner for a while. He had an awful preseason showing. I think that's what a lot of people are pointing to, is we have seen Trey Lance, and it was really bad against really like guys who didn't even make the team, is when we saw him throwing interceptions against guys who are in like the USFL now. And so that was when we last saw Trey Lance really in action. But yeah, according to Jerry, he saw improvement from Cooper Rush, but it didn't turn into a different outcome. So they are now 3-7 overall after the loss to Houston. Final note and close it out. The Jets have fired GM Joe Douglas, 5 years, 0 winning seasons. And they had already fired Robert Saleh, their head coach, about a month and a half ago. Now the GM's gone. So who does Aaron Rodgers want to be the GM and the head coach next year? That's what we're going to find out.
Aaron Rodgers wants to be both those things.
I guess so, man.
He is both those things.
Yep.
He was mad that they didn't go for 2 at one point during the – he was actually right about that, because it enabled Indianapolis to come back and win. But, yeah, no. Aaron Rodgers wants to be the GM. And if the new GM and the new coach of the Jets are smart, they will not bring Aaron Rodgers back.
Yeah, that's a situation definitely to watch. It has not turned out to be the New York dream that so many thought it might be. But, yeah, so the Jets cleaning house in the front office, and eventually you get rid of everybody. And what does that mean?
It's on you.
Eventually it's going to be on you, so we'll see how that goes for them. But there's a few things off the radar.
All right, Garrett, did you get the email I sent you?
Yeah, I got the video.
All right, you guys, I should know this, but I've never heard his name pronounced. Who's the head coach that was just fired at Charlotte? Is it Poggi?
Poggi.
Yeah,
okay.
Biff Poggi.
Biff Poggi. This guy's got a lot of money, but he's also, today, he's fired. He's walking on the field as they're practicing to go say hi to his team, and look at the reaction from his players. He's gone. They're struggling. Just wanted to. So that's really cool. That's the kind of stuff. I love that there's glad to see him. He's out, but thought that was pretty cool for him to come back and see his players, his football team, even though he's no longer their coach. All right. When we come back, we'll hear from John Kurtz on Kansas State. Boy, that was a bruise on Saturday in the loss that they had to Arizona State, who beat them like K-State likes to beat others. Physically, and it was dominant. This is 365 Sports. Pioneer Steel and Pipe, just off the east side of I-35 in Waco. A business that started in 1943, a business that moved into their brand new and still consider it new facility just under 2 years ago. Great people, great ownership, consistency, continuity, and all of what has happened, whether it's the economy, the price of steel or pipe or metal or anything, they are right here and bigger, better, faster, and stronger than ever before. If you're going to build something, whether it's at your house, behind your house, your ranch, or wherever you might be, whether it's home or commercial or real estate, they have the product that you need. And a brand new showroom that they opened up with 2,500 square feet, and I think they said like 1,000 new pieces of product that they have on display if you need it. The ability to go pick up what you want. You may have just enough where you just put it in the back of a pickup truck. Or maybe it's more than that, and a lot of times it is. You might need an 18-wheeler, a hauler, or a large flatbed. They have a flatbed truck that they need, and they can get stuff to you. And it's not long waits. It's efficient because there's more areas and much more personnel there to help load up what you have. It's heavy. Pipe, steel, and metal. Since 1943, Pioneer Steel and Pipe, pioneerboys.com.
When it comes to me and my money, I know the way it should be. I need a partner I can count on. That's Genco and me. Genco is my credit union. They're always there for me. They're people I trust. They treat me like family. My money, my future, my credit union. Genco.
Automatic Chef is your local vending, office coffee, and micro market provider, delivering outstanding service to break rooms all over Central Texas for over 50 years. Automatic Chef brings the best products to your location at the best prices. With hundreds of choices in fresh food, coffee, snacks, and drinks, let Automatic Chef tailor a break room solution to your needs. Make break time great again with Automatic Chef. Automatic Chef Canteen, 6900 Imperial Drive in Waco, or online at automaticchef.com.
Bambi SQ, what is the number one reason or two or three reasons, Bambi, that people should contact House of Travel?
As a travel agency local here in Waco, we can take care of all your bookings, your payments, answer your questions, help you when there are issues or problems, things that may come up that you don't know what to do or how to fix them. People don't realize we don't charge a fee for what we do. It doesn't cost you extra to use a travel agent. We're just here. We get paid by the tour companies and the cruise lines to represent them. But you have an expert on your side that's here and local, and you have a name and a face to put together to help you with anything that you may need. Give us a call. We can price things for you. We can help you answer questions. We can make it simple, easy, and one stop.
Your knowledge of all the years you've done this and then spit it back to them or give them options?
It helps us to kind of know a date range, a budget, what your goals are and what you want to see and do on your vacation. And then that helps us to know what to look for, and we can narrow down and help you make the best choices for your vacation so you get the best value, you get exactly what you were hoping for, and making sure that it's taken care of with a carefree, easy, simple for you type vacation. I've been doing this for over 40 years. Every day I learn something new. I experience new situations and things that I can help take care of for people, whether it's just making sure you get the best deals and find the best vacations, or whether it's to solve that problem, like you've got a flight that's being canceled and you don't know what to do. There's weather coming up. Should I cancel my trip next week because of the hurricane? Those are things that we take care of and you don't have to worry about. You've got somebody that you can rely on that you know is an expert, knows what we're doing, have been doing this for a long time, so that you're not questioning, okay, does the person on the other end of the phone really understand what I'm asking or know how to find those deals? You've got an expert, and we are here to take care of that.
For more information, go to houseoftravelwaco.com. Don's Humidor, your home with a 48-foot walk-in humidor with the elite cigar brands from around the world, including the #1 cigar of the year, Aging Room Cuatro Nicaragua. Plus, they have the great brands like Macanudo and Artur Fuente, Rocky Patel, Aston, and so much more. CBD, great for sore muscles, aches and pains, sleep, Vita Dreams, and anxiety, mild depression, general health and wellness. Their staff very knowledgeable on the subject. Don's Humidor in the Townwest Shopping Center off Valley Mills in Waco.
Want to send a message to the show? Jump in the Rudy's Country Store and Barbecue chat room.
Kansas City Sports Network, John Kurtz joins us with Craig and Paul. David Smoak. This is 365 Sports. We appreciate everybody. If you are watching, viewing, of course, same thing, or listening to us, or both. John, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate you making time for us. We want to get into Coach Klieman and all that, but that was a bruising on Saturday by what Arizona State did to Kansas State. Very impressive for Dillingham. It's a hell of a football team, but that was kind of a Kansas State beating of Kansas State, in my opinion. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would tend to, and I appreciate you guys having me on. Great to talk to you as always. I think there's kind of two routes here. Like, one, I try to remove myself as somebody who is much more K-State centric here and make sure that the proper credit is given to Kenny Dillingham, because I mean they came ready to play and they did smack K-State in the mouth, took full advantage of what K-State did give them, and that's an impressive win. And he's done a Big 12 Coach of the Year worthy job this year. He may not get it because of Kalani Sitake and Coach Prime, but he certainly, in most years, has done a job that is befitting of that. And I don't want to take anything away from that, because I think that's a big story. You know, I mean, Josh Pate, for instance, is going to the Arizona State BYU game this week, which to get somebody that SEC centric, especially this week, as much as he's stumping for the SEC, I think is pretty impressive and indicative of the job that Dillingham has done. So, with that out of the way, I mean, yes, I think that was a pretty wretched performance from K-State. I made the comment at the game, like, I've never heard boos rain down like that at the stadium. And, you know, I've been going to games since literally 1989, the year that Bill Snyder showed up. And I was a student during the Ron Prince era. And I do not remember people booing like they did on Saturday at that, falling behind 21-0 at halftime, 24-0 at one point. You had two botched snaps, like two bad snaps on different field goals that cost them 6 points, which, as poorly as they played, actually would have made a massive difference and would have given them a chance to tie the game late on one of those drives had they just simply executed field goals. And they've got a kicker who's kicking at an all-conference level, but they can't get the ball snapped. You know, they hired an NFL special teams coach this offseason and made a big deal about it. And 2 games in a row now, they've had multiple bad snaps. So, like, I don't know. You tell me how that actually happens. It just – things have really fallen apart. They were up 19-10 in the second half of the Houston game, in the fourth quarter of the Houston game in a driving rainstorm, and it felt like, hey, if you just run, punt, and Houston's not going to be able to move the ball enough to score twice. They can't pass anyway, and now you can just load up the box run. Of course, K-State tries to throw, it gets picked off, and everything's been all downhill since then. But they're just really out of sorts right now. Obviously, you know, I think Chris Klieman's been a little bit distracted, and it was a weird press conference, you know, to be honest, after the game, where I think he was reflecting on some of that. So I don't know. You know, I think they have issues perhaps with the job that's being done at offensive coordinator right now as well. That's certainly a popular sentiment among the fan base. So, look, they can still finish 9-3, and that would at least restore, you know, some level of order probably within the fan base and how people feel about the way things are going. But with what they've done now and missing out on the Big 12 championship game and college football playoff in all overwhelming likelihood, this season will definitely be viewed as a disappointment by most.
John, I know that, I've seen in our chat or anything else, I mean, message board geniuses or whatever, and not to lump all those people in together because I know that they're different, but there's some anger at Chris Klieman right now. But is this just not a team that was ready for the next step, and maybe it's a next year thing now that they know kind of what their holes are?
Well, that was sort of my take on it coming into the year. Is I was like, hey, if you look at the roster, like especially with a starting quarterback as young as Avery Johnson is, next year might be the year where you would expect the big jump in this team to really be a big-time contender. But the problem is, in the portal era, it's really hard to count on that. I mean, it's just hard to hang on to your roster. It's hard to know. There's so much volatility that the mindset has to turn a little bit more to like, hey, we've got to do it right now because you never know what's going to happen. I mean, we've been getting pounded with the questions from people like, what's going to happen in the portal? Are they going to lose guys? Last year's team, had that Iowa State game at the end of the year where right before the game, like that Saturday, they knew that they were not going to be playing for a Big 12 championship. And it felt like some of the guys on that team checked out. And, guys like Will Lee, who was playing corner, just go watch the highlights. You can see how much it looked like he wanted to be there, and he was out the door, and now is at Texas A&M. You had some situations like that on that team, and I think you fear it, and this is not a K-State specific problem, by the way. It's just for anybody now. If you don't accomplish what the goal was for the team that year, are you going to get that same effort, and are guys going to be checked out and ready to hit the portal? So I think that's the concern with it. Like, I think it's a fair take to have on it kind of in a vacuum, but with the circumstances of the sport right now, you just always wonder how all that is going to go down. I mean, having said all that, like, I think quarterback, as much as anything, is as indicative of kind of what you're saying. Like, hey, Avery Johnson probably needed a year here to really fine-tune things before he would be ready to take off and go and truly lead a team to the college football playoff, and I think that's true. We've seen some flashes. If you compare his numbers, he compares pretty favorably to most of the quarterbacks in that class. It's just that it takes guys time, I mean, look at like the situation with Rayola at Nebraska, starts off really hot and tails off a little bit. Nico at Tennessee, like it's hard for quarterbacks that young to be really consistent throughout an entire season. And that's definitely been the case with Avery. I also just think the team is kind of young in a lot of spots. And, some of their best players like DJ Giddens, who is older, is literally about the quietest guy that you will ever meet. So they just, I don't know if they have like the leadership, the guys that are necessary to really stem the tide when things are going poorly in a driving rainstorm at Houston in a game that you should probably win. Or, you throw an early interception and get a bad call go against you at the Arizona State game. All of a sudden you're down 7-0. Klieman even said it in his post-game press conference. They just haven't been good at stopping bad momentum when it happens early in a game. Go back to the BYU game. They have one turnover. It turns into like 3. And just an avalanche of points in a 6-minute span from BYU because they just couldn't stop the bleeding. So I think some of that is them just being young, not having a ton of leadership in those spots. So it'll be a real test. Chris Klieman likes to talk about the culture of the program, and it seems like it's been pretty good, but I do think it's definitely going to be tested now in the coming weeks, and then looking at what happens in the offseason.
John, I almost thought that was their last home game last Saturday just because of how emotional Chris Klieman was and talking about the seniors and all that, but they do get this final home game here against Cincinnati. Your thoughts on what you've seen from the Bearcats? And I guess you'd be nervous no matter who's lining up against K-State right now because of recent results, but how much do you worry about Cincinnati coming and playing spoiler and really ruining the feeling around Manhattan right now?
Yeah, it's fair to say. I mean, right now, the way that they have played the last 2 weeks, they're capable of losing to about anybody in the conference for sure. So, yeah, Cincinnati more than capable of doing that. They were right there with Iowa State into the fourth quarter. I think the final score looks a little bit better for the Cyclones than what it actually was. So they're game enough to do it. I don't know. And on the press conference thing, I think some of that is Klieman realizing that he had to spend some time away, I believe, from the team during the bye week because of some family stuff that he has going on. And I think he felt bad that it appeared that the team wasn't very well prepared because of that, and he felt bad for the older guys on the team that they weren't going to be able to play for a Big 12 championship or go to the college football playoff. And I think that's what kind of sparked a lot of that. But it was unexpected. It was definitely unexpected from most of us in the room when that happened. So, yeah, I mean, the tough part about this is, like I just mentioned, this is a program that the last 3 or 4 years has had the expectation like we are going to compete for a Big 12 championship. And so when that doesn't happen, and then you've still got games left on the schedule, what kind of an effort are you going to give? All right, now throw in the layer that not that Cincinnati is some terrible program, but it's not a program that you have any connection with. It's not a program that you have any juice with. You know, I think this is another issue with just the state of college football right now in conference realignment. Like Cincinnati's 5-5, right? Okay, Nebraska's 5-5. If Nebraska were coming in here, even if you knew that you weren't making the Big 12 championship game, but you've got a regional rivalry and a history, and the fans really care about it, there would be, I think, more of an impetus for the team to get up and be fired up for the game. But you just don't have that, and that's one of the things that everybody is going to deal with at some point or another because of what conference realignment has done to the sport. So unfortunately, I just think it's a pretty good example of that with the game that K-State has. I worry certainly about Sorsby and his legs. He did a great job, obviously, running against Iowa State, and K-State's had trouble stopping mobile quarterbacks this year. Sam Leavitt really made some key plays with his feet and even just throwing on the run a couple of times in that game. And Leavitt, you know, I mean, I talked about quarterbacks from that class. He's in the same class as Avery Johnson and obviously way outplayed him last week. So it's not like you're always getting up and down efforts. Sam Leavitt's been pretty good. But that would be one of my real fears. It's Sorsby combined with just the general malaise that you could get out of K-State in this game because it's a team they don't have ties to, and you know how much are those guys going to care if they know that it's not necessarily going to be playing for what their ultimate goal was this year.
Klieman even mentioned that I am not going anywhere. I'm not going to retire or whatever. And I know if it's a family issue, it's a private issue, that's fine. But it was enough to where he had to even mention that or was even asked about it. Is everything okay with him?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take him at his word. You know, I mean, Tim Fitzgerald asked the question to him. Fitz is about as good as it gets on the beat in terms of being somebody that's tight with Chris Klieman. There were definitely rumors that were flying around after the press conference, but you also have to think back to, I mean, he had an incident earlier in the season. I'm trying to remember if that was I feel like it was the Kansas game, where he had some like dizzy spells on the sideline. Yeah. And so I think a lot of people started connecting that together and being like, okay, is that, but that's not what this is. Like I said, it is a family issue that popped up right before the Houston game that he's had to deal with here. So, you know, I don't know. I will say he's always a guy. I don't think it's a particularly well-kept secret that he's a guy that doesn't want to be coaching like Bill Snyder into his late 70s or 80s. And you combine that with the way just the game is rapidly changing, and we're seeing a lot of these coaches, you know, like Tony Bennett, just say, to hell with this. I'm not going to deal with the portal and NIL and everything. So if you're more in that kind of mode, it can certainly wear on you. And when you combine that with, hey, family issues coming up, hey, I had dizziness on the sideline, like this is where I think people started to get that idea that maybe that's coming sooner rather than later. But I certainly have not heard anything like credible or definitive that is going to happen, but I understand where the speculation came from based on all that. So, you know, do I expect him to be the coach in 10 years there? No, certainly not. I don't know if he started pinning me down below that. I guess maybe it's not fair to fully speculate on that, but I don't think that he's a guy that's going to be doing it for a super long time. And you know what? Like, I definitely respect that.
John, do you think that he will make any coaching staff changes, particularly on offense where, you know, and granted, you know, look, Colin Klein is one of your own, right? I mean, they're going to love him no matter what. He's in the free beer for life in Manhattan Club. Like that's not in question. So you lose him, you're obviously not going to like the next guy as much, but does he maybe make a change offensively, or does he like where they are? It's just an experience thing like we talked about earlier.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the $1 million question heading into the offseason. Klieman has always been very, to a fault, sometimes loyal and slow to make changes, especially when they're his guys, which they generally have been. And that was the case with Courtney Messingham, who was the offensive coordinator before Colin Klein. Fans were not big fans of Courtney Messingham the entire time that he was there. And it felt like it was probably a year or two late that he made the change there. It took a really bad game in Austin in 2021 that they should have won against Texas and really blew. And there was just some very questionable play calling at the end of that game. And it was one of those moments where it kind of felt like, all right, man, if it's ever going to happen, it has to happen now. Well, then he promotes from within, which, is Colin Klein, who was right there, kind of fell into his lap and turned into a star as an offensive coordinator, worked out great. And credit Klieman for making that move, by the way, because Courtney Messingham was his best friend. And that's something like Chris Kleiman's a very sensitive guy. I think he's a very good person. And definitely is more empathetic than a lot of coaches are. And so that's a part of why his attitude is the way that it is. But I think that's also been a frustration for fans. Why not make more of these moves? The coaching staff, I do think some things have gotten stale. They've had a lot of guys on the staff for a while that fans have really questioned. But most of the time when he's made a move, it's been just an internal hire. He lost Scotty Hazelton as defensive coordinator after year one, promotes from within with Joe Klanderman. That I think has turned out pretty well. I think he's done a pretty good job. Helped him win a Big 12 championship. So sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. But I think the fans would look at it and say, well, our frustration here is that, one, you don't make moves quick enough. You're not cutthroat enough. And that's why we're stuck at this kind of 8-9 win ceiling most of the time and have only broken through once for the Big 12 championship. I think that's what a lot of fans would tell you. There might be some truth in that, but I also think sometimes him staying the course has probably been better than being overly reactionary. So I say all that to say the fans desperately want to change an offensive coordinator. I do think that it feels like Connor Riley's been figured out a little bit, who is the OC this year, that about halfway through the year. I mean, midway through the Big 12 season, they were the number one offense in points per drive in the league. And it seemed like, all right, things are going fine. But since then, they have not been able to run the ball. DJ Giddens has really struggled. Avery Johnson has kind of fallen back into some of the early season habits, and they're 10th now in points per drive in the league. So it's been a pretty big fall over the last month, and it just feels like he hasn't had an adjustment when enough film got out there from other teams. Now, that's me as just a guy sitting on my couch watching it, media guy in the press box, whatever. Maybe coaches would tell me something different, but that's kind of my perception right now. And the other dynamic is, you've got a really high-profile quarterback. What's he going to think? What's he going to want? And how would that factor into everything? So I think it's a complicated decision. I don't know what I really expect Chris Klieman to do, but I think it's not going to be as knee-jerk reactionary as a lot of fans really want. I mean, frankly, a lot of people have floated now for a while like, hey, you've got Matt Wells on staff, and Wells has been down on the field talking to Avery Johnson in his headset and then on the sideline, whereas Connor Riley's been up in the booth calling plays. A lot of people have said, well, why not during the bye week flip those two and have Wells go back up to the booth, be more of the guy calling plays. He's been an offensive coordinator before, obviously. Connor Riley's an offensive line coach. The offensive line appears to be struggling. Have him down there where he can get down in their face, and that's just not something that Chris Kleiman's wanted to do in the middle of the season. Not surprising to me, but I understand why people were asking for it.
John, before we let you go here, your thoughts, another playoff ranking show tonight. Will be interesting to see where BYU falls and just sort of where Colorado, for example, is positioned. But your thoughts on another chaotic and entertaining weekend in the Big 12, but a lot of self-inflicted wounds and just kind of the big picture when it comes to the league and its bigger aspirations.
Yeah, my thoughts are Kansas must be stopped. We've got to put an end to what Lance Leipold is trying to do to the conference right now. I kid. I mean, a heck of an effort by them, and honestly, one that felt really telegraphed. Like you could see that coming a mile away. Yeah. BYU's just been playing with fire too much, and Colorado honestly feels to me like it felt the last couple of weeks like Colorado had been playing the best of anybody in the conference right now. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it gets the Boise part of this discussion is going to get really frustrating, I think, or at least just stressful for Big 12 fans for a while, tracking will your conference champion be able to finish higher in the college football playoff poll than Boise to be able to get an auto bye? And then, even keep an eye on Army, too. I know that's like the nightmare scenario for both the Big 12 or ACC because the same thing could happen to the ACC. But if you wind up with a 3-loss conference champion somehow with a bunch of chaos and Army beats Notre Dame and wins out, and then you got Army and Boise there, could you get totally left out of the thing? I don't think that we'll have to explore that too deeply because I think they will lose this weekend. But, I don't expect a lot of kindness from the committee, to be completely honest, on the BYU thing. Felt like a lot of people had just been really waiting for a reason to drop them. I know that the committee actually was pretty forgiving to BYU last week by putting them all the way up at 6. But I think they're going to take a pretty stark fall, and the Big 12 and maybe the ACC too, frankly, are going to have to play this game of like looking at, all right, where are we at, and where are those pesky Boise State Broncos at?
Yep, it should be fun tonight. Who knows? They also could just be like messing with people. You never know, although they shouldn't be doing that. I think they kind of enjoy doing that. Thank you very much, John. Great stuff as always. John Kurtz, his podcast as well, covers the heck of the Big 12. Remember, he also has his newsletter that's out. If you haven't seen that, you can also get that by getting a hold of John Kurtz with us on 365 Sports, the newsletter, and I had it here because I get it in the morning. I'm going to make sure I say it the correct way.
Open for business.
Open for business, the Big 12 newsletter, and it comes in your email just like it would be anything else that you might have a subscription to with other websites. We're now joined by the Hall of Famer John McClain. And the Texans, John, take care of their business. At times I wondered who could get out of their own way, but they took care of their business, and it's a nice win for them. They needed it.
Well, excuse me, first, I would like to say, how about those fighting Baylor Bears? And I think they're going to steamroll U of H, beat Kansas, win out and go 8-4. I'm hoping they end up at the Texas Bowl. I've seen projections, LSU. I've seen Vanderbilt, who they beat here a few years ago. Anyway, yes, the Texans, they struggle on offense in the second half as they've done now for 5 consecutive games before they scored that late touchdown, that bizarre strip sack. Tyler Guyton trying to pick up the ball and run, which was ridiculous. Jalen Petrie knocking the snot out of him to force a fumble. Petrie, what a game he had. He got screwed royally by the officials calling a personal foul when it shouldn't be. And when the rules expert, Gene Steratore, comes on here and says it should have been, they're right. I've never seen officiating bad in the NFL as I do this year, worse than any time in my 48 years of covering the NFL. The Cowboys, they're on a pace right now to set the NFL record for most points allowed at home in a season. And right now that record is owned, average points per game, by the 1960 Cowboys in their inaugural season. And, there's all kind of levels of bad. We know Mike McCarthy's going to be fired. I'm still stunned they're not playing Trey Lance. I thought last night they gave up a 4 for Trey Lance and they won't play him. And while Joe Mixon's running through him and over him, they could have given up. Texans gave up 7 to get him from Cincinnati, even though he scored 12 touchdowns last year and had almost 1,400 yards as a runner and receiver. Cowboys could have done that. So the deficiencies and now in their injury-plagued offensive line, and in the running game, which we've all known since the off season, are so glaring. But as I tell you guys every week, the more you lose, the higher your draft pick in every round. That's the light at the end of the tunnel. And so, but I'm still confused about why they're not playing Trey Lance after giving up that 4th-round pick for him, to see if he can be the backup next year, or if he looks good on tape, even if they lose, they might can trade him for a 3. This is a bad year to try to get a quarterback in the draft and maybe free agency. And the Cowboys, of course, they may need a quarterback, but they're not going to get one because of Dak Prescott and his contract.
John, I have a simple theory on what's going on with the Cowboys. They don't know what they're doing. They have no idea how to work the cap like other teams. They have no idea what trade value is. They gave up a fourth for Jonathan Mingo. They gave up a fourth for Trey Lance when they could have gotten him for way less, or they could have gotten a better player than that for a fourth-round pick. They didn't get the proper value for Amari Cooper. Like, this is a mess. Like, I've never thought this before, but obviously Jerry the GM has always been a problem. But now I think Jerry the owner is too, which I don't think was the case before now.
Now, it's strange to me because of winning 12 games 3 years in a row and this year, and Jerry does not make those decisions by himself. Somebody is advising him bad. Well, we got to give the 49ers a 4 for Trey Lance as competition. And yes, I know we liked him coming out of North Dakota State, even though he only played one game as last year because of COVID. And you're right, they could have gotten him for less. But Jerry's not in there doing those negotiations. Somebody, whether it's Mike McCarthy saying, man, we really got him. We really need him to be a backup. Well, they didn't. Cooper Rush is a good backup. You know, he didn't play bad last night. He had some bad plays, but he wasn't terrible. He threw for 357 yards, I think, and despite a fierce pass rush that was bashing him all over the place in the second round. So somebody is telling Jerry, no, we don't need to contact Derrick Henry because we can't afford $8 million under a cap when they could have. You see the 49ers, the Eagles, the Chiefs, they bring in expensive players, but they know what they're doing. Whoever's their cap expert, I don't think he's making decisions, but Jerry is getting bad advice this year from people on contracts, on personnel, and on trades.
John, how far away from being an NFL head coach do you think Deion Sanders would be? And I'm not trying to go crazy here. I know Michael Irvin and Colin Cowherd kind of talked about it a little bit because Irvin's such buddies with him, and the Cowboys are going through what they're going through. But there's also Deion's just being asked about it in general because of the success they're having and that Shador and Travis Hunter are moving on. Like, is that just totally unrealistic, or do you think there's actually more opportunity there than maybe people would think?
Okay, you got to think about Deion besides what's happening on the field. And he's doing a great job. And they win the Big 12. They're in the playoffs. And if it wasn't for Curt Cignetti at Indiana, he'd be a leading candidate to be Coach of the Year. And he should be in that group right behind Cignetti. But if Cignetti goes to Ohio State and gets his brains beat in, all those people talking about, yeah, you're 10-0 for the first time in history, but you played an easy schedule, they're going to come out. Plus, they might lose the next game. And if they get in the playoff, they could lose that. So don't rule out Deion, especially with Big 12 being so mediocre. I still can't believe Utah lost at home to Kansas, but they've been barely surviving as it was. But Deion, you can't control the media in the NFL like he does there. You can't let your players go over and antagonize opposing fans and your son flash his Rolex. When they were Tech and he complained to Jerry Maguire about fans throwing things, and said, Jerry, I think Joey told him, well, tell your players to quit going over there after every touchdown and antagonizing them. And you can't do that in the NFL. So Deion would have to change his coaching tactics, not behind the scenes, but publicly. You can't survive in the NFL coaching the way he does off the field, like he does college. I think those methods are perfect for college. Some people that know him think he wants to go back to Florida State. You know, I don't know after Florida State goes unbeaten, Paul, if they're going to fire the guy after one bad season. But I could see Deion, if he doesn't have a quarterback next year, he can't take a chance on going 4-8 next year. He'd be better off to sit out for a year and then try to get another job, if indeed that's what he wants to do. You know, Deion's got to be making money. Hell, off those Aflac commercials with him and Saban. No telling what they're making off of that. So I don't see him in the NFL, but a guy like Jerry Jones I'd rather bring in Oh, this is something I was told last night, and see what you guys think about. In the pregame warm-ups, when you're supposed to be working and getting ready for the game on the field, that CeeDee Lamb and Micah Parsons were over signing autographs for fans. Now, I haven't seen that, and I think that's a bad look, and I think it's bad for McCarthy. Also, I can't believe Mike Zimmer. Oh, and Diggs was doing it too. That Mike Zimmer would let him get away with that unless they all know they're fired. And I know Bill Belichick wouldn't put up with that. Mike Vrabel wouldn't put up with that. I'm hoping that Jerry will hire Mike Vrabel. Titans obviously made a big mistake in firing him 2 years after he's coached a year. But McCarthy knows he's gone, and it's just a matter, does Jerry bring in a former head coach? Does he bring in a hot coordinator? Or does he go after Bill Belichick? Because people think Belichick's coming back.
Nobody ever thought that Parcells would work out there, and it wasn't perfect, but they did. They got along. But is Belichick different than Parcells in certain ways?
Oh, yeah. And I was covering the NFL then, and Parcells told me that 2 times. One time was when Jerry wanted T.O. Parcells didn't really want him, but he said, hey, if you want to bring him in here, I'll coach him the best I can. The other one was Eddie George, also at the end of his career. He didn't really want him. Was it James Jones? Is that his name? Young running back,
yeah.
Parcells like.
Yep.
And he wanted him, but he said, if you want Eddie George, I'll coach him. Now, Belichick doesn't have as forceful a personality and as outgoing as Parcells is, but the Bill we're seeing in all the media outlets is not the Bill who would be the head coach and that we would see. But Belichick says, oh, I don't have to have total control. And maybe he doesn't when he gets the job. But can you imagine a general manager? Belichick says, I don't like that guy. I don't want to draft him. That GM go, well, I'm going to draft him because I like him. No, he would intimidate the heck out of most people, just like Parcells did. But Parcells, at that point in his career, he was able to roll with the punches and be more flexible than he had been earlier in his career. And I'm guessing Belichick would be too.
All right, John. So the Texans needed a win. They got one. I thought that at times during that game, I heard a little bit about him. I thought C.J. Stroud is either spooked, sometimes rushed his throws because I know he hasn't had great protection. But there was a time in the middle of that game, if Dallas would have had any kind of I don't want to say heartbeat because they're playing hard, or anything at all, that game could have gotten away from Houston. Is that just kind of how they've played the last few weeks?
Well, they led Detroit by 16 points at halftime and lost on a 52-yard field goal with no time left. They led the Packers, lost on a field goal with no time left. And those are, 2 NFC North teams. And in their last game, that Detroit game, if he had hit a wide-open Tank Dell in the end zone, instead of hesitating and then the ball was intercepted, they would have beaten the Lions. But the fact is he's been hit so much, and especially up the middle, that he's expecting it. Now, last night he got rid of the ball quicker. Well, Micah Parsons had 1 assist. The rest was goose eggs. Now, he got some pressure, but he didn't hit him. He didn't knock him down. He didn't have a tackle for loss. And the Cowboys had 1 sack, 1 knockdown, and 2 tackles for loss. So the offensive line played better, but Stroud's been off target. I call it discombobulated. Now, if that 77-yard touchdown had been good on the first play to Nico Collins, his stats would have looked gaudy. But the fact is, especially in the second half, he has not been on target like he was last year. And yes, Nico Collins missed 5 games. Stephon Diggs is out for the season, missed the last 3. Joe Mixon missed 2.5 games. But the fact is, it doesn't matter if your passes are just a little bit off because you're rushing. And I've seen it didn't happen early in the season when they were 5-1, but man, when they started getting killed at Green Bay and that interior lineman, they were bamboozled by stunts that they couldn't pick up. He hasn't been the same. His rating's down to 88 after being 100 last season. And this stretch of the Cowboys, the Titans, and the Jaguars, they've got to win those 3. and they need a couple of games on offense that is very smooth consistently, because then they go their bye week and they come out home against Miami, at Kansas City, home against Baltimore, as people are saying it's a Beyonce concert on a Christmas Day on Netflix, and they've got a football game in there too, and then they close it up at Tennessee. So they got to be, I don't think they'll beat Kansas City, Baltimore. They've never beaten Baltimore, but they still have a chance to finish 11-6 if they win the games they're supposed to.
John, thank you very much. And you're right, your Baylor Bears, they're on a roll, and heck, all of a sudden, not just becoming bowl eligible with bigger fish to fry.
Yes, they do. I think they're going to win out. The Cougars are wearing their Columbia blue rip-off to the Oilers last year. The NFL told them don't do it again. They're doing it, defying the NFL, but I don't think it's going to matter. Sick 'em Bears.
Thank you, Don. Appreciate it. Hall of Famer. Oh, my God. He has so many stories and memories and all of what he does, and we appreciate his time on Tuesdays in the 5 o'clock hour, okay? We're not done. We have a lot. Hey, tomorrow, just to let you know, a couple of unique guests for us. Brian Carrington, a part of the staff at Arizona State, will join us. He's a Texas native. Also tomorrow, Tom Pernetti, the commissioner, Tim Pernetti, the commissioner of the American Conference, will join us tomorrow. And there's one other guest tomorrow that we have. I just went blank on who it might be. Houston assistant coach Sean Bell, who was at Baylor and played at Baylor, will be on our show tomorrow, too, along with Scott Drew. So a busy day tomorrow, and this is 365 Sports. Waco Custom Marketplace. Bacon ends in pieces, $1.50 a pound. This is going on right now at their store at 425 Lake Erie Drive in Waco. Whole chickens are $1.50. Chuck roast for $7.50. As the weather, although it's beautiful here, if the weather starts to get a little bit chilly, then maybe things like chili or stew or pot roast or things like that. Plus, of course, Thanksgiving just around the corner. Ring bologna, $4.75 a pound, and oxtails at $8.50 a pound. I was watching something today on YouTube, which was Meat Church and what he does with a turkey, and it's phenomenal. The brine, the seasoning, and more. And I watched it. It's like 15 minutes long because I'm thinking about doing that myself. They have all of what you need when it comes to the brine and seasoning from Meat Church at their store. Full-service butcher shop, full-service bakery, hams, pitted hams, raw turkeys and whole turkeys, all of that available. Brian Bauer and the Bauer family, 425 Lake Erie Drive in Waco.
For Paul Catalina's Top 5, brought to you by Texas Beef House. Where's the best beef in Texas? Your house when you order from Texas Beef House. Unleash the flavor of Texas raised Wagyu. From our pasture to your plate, TexasBeefHouse.com.
Welcome into the Tuesday edition of the Top 5. I'm Paul Catalina. Brought to you by Texas Beef House. Of course, use our promo code 365sports for a discount at checkout when you get involved in that next auction. Top 5 teams that have turned college football upside down. With the 12-team playoff, we knew was going to create some chaos, but I think it's exceeded all of our expectations in that with expansion, with all these things, guess what? There are some teams we didn't expect to be good that are good now. For example, like Arizona State. My goodness. Picked to the bottom of the Big 12. I picked them towards the bottom, if not at the very end of the Big 12 at the beginning of this year. I thought they might show a little bit of promise because I really like Kenny Dillingham, but holy cow. Now they're in the thick of the conference race and could wind up being a playoff team. Mind blown officially, thanks to Arizona State. My mind keeps blowing at the fact that Indiana is a team that at this point right now, should they only lose to Ohio State, and that's this week, they're going to make the playoff. They should make the playoff because they'll have the same exact resume as Penn State, who'll have that same deal. So, looks like Curt Cignetti is a magic man in Bloomington. Cannot believe what they've been doing, but right now I don't see any reason why they're not a playoff team. And if they win against Ohio State, write them in. Permanent marker. Indiana in the playoff. I think that's going to happen either way. Number 3, Army. Huge disruptors here. The fact that they could get to the conference championship game undefeated, and depending on what happens with Boise State, this could be the G5 team that's in the playoffs. And there's a couple teams I can tell you right now that if they drew Army in the first round, they'd be panicked. Most namely Miami, who can't stop the run, and that's all Army really does. But they have disrupted college football, and on a year when they thought, Army, Navy, and this thing will never happen. Let's keep it in the second week in December. For a while there, actually until about 2 weeks ago, there was legitimate concern that the Army and Navy game could be played with one of them determined to have a playoff spot and the other one with the same record, and then the loser flipping the script a little bit when the playoff was already set. Number 2, BYU. The loss against Kansas, notwithstanding, not their best offensive output, still a pretty good defensive output. In fact, it was special teams and defense that won it for the Jayhawks in Provo on Saturday night. But BYU at 9-1, not picking their quarterback Jake Retzlaff until literally the week of the first game, and him being as good as he has been, that defense being punishing, physical. Kalani Sitake's true attitude runs through the veins of that team, and you can see it week in and week out. And look, if they went out, they're still going to be in the playoff in spite of that loss they took to Kansas this week. And number 1, SMU. SMU has made the best transition to power conference football of any team that's ever moved up. They get a scare now and again, but Rhett Lashley has that team going. The defense is effective. The offense is lethal. Kevin Jennings is turning into a star. Really fun team to watch in Dallas. The Ponies are doing it and doing it well. Only Garrett got that. Only he got that. But the Ponies, really excellent. And really right now, if you look at how the other top teams in the ACC are playing down the stretch, I could argue that they're playing the best football in that conference over Miami and Clemson right now. But it remains to be seen who the ACC automatic bid will be once that championship games happens. But this team, SMU, has a great shot at being ACC champs in year 1, and that is no small feat. That's going to do it for the top 5. King Smoak, please dismiss us.
Oh, my God. You are sucking up, but thank you very much. We appreciate that. Emery Winter, by the way, when I was walking by him, he was already dialing up and editing the various segments for 365 Sports tonight at 10:30 on the CW. I had somebody come up to me. I had a DM and a Twitter DM from TJ, my good friend TJ that sends all the snake videos. He goes, damn, I just saw you guys. I didn't know you were on at 10:30. Every night, every weeknight, the local CW in the Central Texas area. We are there every night at 10:30. For Craig Smoak, Garrett Ross, thank you very much. Garrett, what hat do you have on today?
A's.
The A's hat, one of the great hats of all time. Paul Catalina, Emery Winter, all of our great sponsors, and you, those of you who joined us, whether it's on the app Sikkim365 or on Twitter at 365YT, 365 Sports YT, and of course on and in the chat room on 365 Sports YouTube. I'm David Smoak. Have a great night. Thanks for your time. We never take that for granted. Good night, 365 Sports.